The handprint on my cheek still burned as the town car pulled up. I told myself I could cover the bruise with heavy foundation and pretend our home was peaceful. I had no idea my grandfather was waiting for exactly this proof. A single mark on my arm was about to expose a decade of stolen money and lies. My stepmother thought she was winning, but she was just one signature away from losing every single thing she had tried to steal. My name is Natalie Pierce, and I am 27 years old. I was standing in the center of the kitchen in our suburban home, my fingers clutching a ceramic mug so tightly that my knuckles had turned white. The coffee inside was cold, a dark, stagnant pool that trembled with every vibration of my hand. The morning sun was streaming through the bay windows, casting cheerful, geometric shapes across the granite countertops. But the air inside the house felt thick enough to choke on. My cheek was throbbing. It was a distinct, rhythmic pulse of heat that seemed to sync with my racing heart. Melanie Carter, the woman who had insisted I call her mom since I was 16, was pacing the length of the kitchen island. Her heels clicked against the tile floor like gunshots. She was screaming. But it was not the chaotic, hysterical screaming of someone who has lost control. It was precise. It was calculated. Every word she spat at me was designed to land exactly where it would hurt the most. "You are a parasite, Natalie," Melanie hissed, stopping abruptly to slam her hand down on the counter. "A selfish, ungrateful parasite. You think I don't see what you are doing? You go over there every weekend, batting your eyelashes at Walter, whispering poison in his ear. You are trying to turn him against us. You are trying to cut your father out of what is rightfully his." I opened my mouth to speak, to defend myself, but the words died in my throat. My father, Thomas Pierce, was standing in the doorway that led to the dining room. He was dressed for work in his gray suit, looking every bit the respectable businessman, but his posture was slumped, defeated. He would not look at me. He fixed his gaze on the floor, studying the grout lines as if they held the secrets to the universe. "Dad," I said, my voice cracking, "please, tell her that isn't true. I just go to have brunch with him." Thomas shifted his weight, finally glancing up, but his eyes slid right past mine to focus on the wall behind me. "Just don't provoke her, Natalie," he mumbled, his voice barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator. "You know how she gets when she is stressed. Just apologize so we can all move on." The injustice of it burned hotter than the mark on my face. Apologize? For what? For existing? For maintaining a relationship with my own grandfather? "I am not provoking anyone," I said, turning back to Melanie. I tried to keep my voice steady, to channel some of the professional detachment I used at my job at Northline Systems, but I was failing. "I am going to brunch. Grandpa Walter is expecting me. That is all." "Don't you dare walk away from me!" Melanie shrieked. I reached for my car keys on the counter. That was the trigger. The distance between us closed in a blur of motion. I did not see her hand raise. I only felt the impact. It was a sharp, cracking sound that seemed to echo inside my skull. Her palm connected with my left cheek, the force of it snapping my head to the side. The coffee mug slipped from my numb fingers and shattered on the floor, sending shards of ceramic and cold liquid skittering across the tiles. I stumbled back, gasping, my hand flying up to cup my face. Before I could regain my balance, Melanie shoved me. It was not a playful push. She drove both hands into my chest, slamming me backward into the hard edge of the kitchen table. The wood dug viciously into my lower back and hip, knocking the wind out of me. For a second, there was total silence. Even Melanie seemed surprised by the violence of it. I stood there, gripping the edge of the table to keep from sliding down into the puddle of coffee. My breath was coming in short, shallow gasps. My cheek was on fire, but the pain in my hip was a dull, sickening ache that I knew would turn into a deep bruise within hours. My internal monologue, usually a stream of anxieties and to-do lists, had gone completely silent, replaced by a cold, hard realization. This was new. We had always had the yelling. We had always had the emotional manipulation, the gaslighting, the financial coercion, but she had never hit me, not once. "This is assault," A voice in my head whispered, "This is not normal family drama. This is a crime." But then, the training kicked in. The decade of conditioning that told me to keep the peace, to protect my father, to not make a scene. I looked at my father. He had not moved. He had not rushed forward to help me. He had actually taken a half step back, retreating into the shadows of the hallway. "You listen to me," Melanie said, her voice dropping to a low, terrifying growl. She stepped over the broken mug, ignoring the coffee soaking into the hem of her expensive slacks. "If you say one word to that old man about this, if you breathe a single syllable about what happens in this house, you will regret it. I will make sure you are cut off so completely you won't even be able to afford a cardboard box to live in. Don't you expect to see a single dime of the family money? Not one." Money. It always came back to money with her. I looked at the clock on the microwave. It was 9:45. I was already late. Grandpa Walter was a stickler for punctuality. He was an old-school real estate mogul who believed that being on time was a sign of character. If I didn't show up, he would worry. If he worried, he might call the house phone. If he called the house, Melanie would answer, and God knows what lie she would spin. "I have to go," I whispered. I stepped around the mess on the floor, giving Melanie a wide berth. She did not move to stop me this time, just watched me with eyes that looked like two chips of flint. I ran to my small bedroom at the back of the house, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the doorknob. Once inside, I leaned against the door, closing my eyes for a brief second to stop the room from spinning. I went to the mirror. The mark was undeniable. 4 distinct red welts were rising on my cheekbone, the imprint of her fingers clear against my pale skin. In an hour, it would be purple. I grabbed my makeup bag and frantically began applying concealer, layering the thick beige liquid over the skin. It stung, but I didn't care. I blended and buffed until the red was mostly muted, then added a layer of powder. It looked heavy, cakey, but it would have to do. My arms were worse. I had bruises on my upper arm from where she had grabbed me 2 days ago, and now a fresh throbbing pain in my hip. I couldn't wear the sleeveless blouse I had picked out. I tore through my closet, my breath hitching in my chest. I pulled out a long-sleeved silk blouse with a high neck. It was too warm for the weather, but it was the only thing that would cover everything. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I jumped, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was a text from the driver my grandfather employed. "Mr. Henderson is outside. Miss Pierce." Then, a second buzz, a message from Grandpa Walter. "Running a bit behind? No worries. Sweetheart, take your time. Order me a coffee when you get there. Today is important. We need to talk." He had added a red heart emoji at the end. That simple, digital heart broke me more than the slap had. He had no idea. He was sitting there in his favorite booth at the club, thinking we were just going to discuss his garden or my job, while I was here covering up the evidence of a war zone. I took a deep breath. Smoothing down the front of my shirt, I grabbed my purse. I had to get out. I had to get out before I started crying, because if I started, I didn't think I would be able to stop. I opened my bedroom door and walked down the hallway. The kitchen was empty now. The broken mug was gone. The floor wiped clean. It was as if it had never happened. That was Melanie's specialty, erasing the evidence of her cruelty until you started to wonder if you had imagined it all. I reached for the front door handle. Leaving so soon? I froze. Melanie was standing in the foyer, leaning against the wall. She had fixed her hair and reapplied her lipstick. She looked perfect. The monster from the kitchen was gone, replaced by the concerned stepmother. She pushed off the wall and stepped into my personal space. I flinched, but I forced myself to stand my ground. She reached out and took my arm, her hand wrapped around my bicep, her fingers digging precisely into the bruise she had left earlier in the week. The pain was sharp and white-hot. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from gasping. She leaned in close, her lips brushing my ear. She smelled of expensive perfume and coffee. "Remember to smile properly. Natalie," she whispered, "remember who paid for that fancy college degree of yours. Remember who keeps the roof over your head. You go have a nice brunch, but keep your mouth shut." She squeezed harder, a final warning pinch that made my eyes water, and then she let go. She patted my arm gently, as if smoothing out a wrinkle in the fabric. "Have fun," she said, her voice loud and bright, for the benefit of anyone who might be listening. I pushed the front door open and stepped out into the blinding morning light. The sun was oppressive, exposing everything. I felt like a creature that had been living under a rock, suddenly overturned. The town car was waiting at the curb, a sleek black Sentinel in our modest driveway. Mr. Henderson was standing by the rear passenger door, his posture rigid. I forced the corners of my mouth up. It felt like physical labor. My face felt tight, the heavy makeup feeling like a mask of dried clay. "Good morning, Mr. Henderson," I said. My voice sounded thin, brittle. "Good morning, Miss Pierce," he replied, opening the door for me. I slid into the cool leather interior, the darkness of the tinted windows offering a momentary relief. As Mr. Henderson closed the door, I looked back at the house. The front door was closed, but above the entryway, the small blue light of the doorbell camera blinked once. It was a new system Thomas had installed last month at Melanie's insistence. She wanted to monitor packages, she said. She wanted to see who was coming and going. I stared at that unblinking electronic eye. It had seen us. It had seen the confrontation at the threshold. It had recorded the way she grabbed me, the way I flinched, the way she leaned in to whisper her threats. It was all there, stored in the cloud, silent and waiting. We pulled away from the curb. I sank back into the seat, my hands trembling in my lap. I brought my hand up to my cheek, my fingers hovering over the spot where she had hit me. It was throbbing in time with the car's engine. I was leaving one world, a world of violence, silence, and fear, and traveling to another. The country club was only 20 minutes away, but it felt like a different planet. It was a place of polite conversation, clinking silverware, and old money, a place where people like Walter Kincaid commanded respect with a mere lift of an eyebrow. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror one more time. The concealer was holding. If I kept the lights dim, if I kept my head turned slightly to the right, maybe he wouldn't notice. I just had to get through brunch. I just had to pretend for 2 more hours. The car glided through the wrought iron gates of the club. The manicured lawns stretched out on either side, an impossible, vibrant green. We pulled up to the portico, and the valet opened my door. I stepped out, smoothing my skirt. The air here smelled different, like freshly cut grass and old cedar. I walked up the steps, my heels silent on the plush runner. Grandpa Walter was waiting for me in the lobby. He was standing near the large fireplace, leaning heavily on his cane, but his posture was still upright, commanding. He was wearing his favorite navy blazer with the gold buttons. When he saw me, his face lit up with that warm, crinkly smile that always made me feel safe. "There she is," he said, his voice booming slightly. "My favorite girl." I walked toward him, forcing the smile to stay fixed on my face. "Hi, Grandpa. I am so sorry I'm late." He opened his arms for a hug. I stepped into his embrace carefully, wincing as his hand patted my back, right over the spot where the table had dug into my ribs. I pulled away quickly, terrified he would feel the tension in my body. "Nonsense," he said, waving his hand. "You are here now?" He looked at me then, really looked at me. The smile on his face didn't fade, but his eyes, those sharp, steel-gray eyes that had built an empire from nothing, narrowed slightly. He tilted his head, his gaze dropping from my eyes to my cheek, and then down to my long sleeves. "You are dressed warm for a day like this, aren't you?" he asked. It was a casual question, light and airy, but the tone underneath was heavy with something I couldn't quite place. Suspicion? Concern? "I was feeling a bit of a chill," I lied. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. "Is that so?" Walter said. He didn't move. He just stood there, studying me, his eyes scanning my face like he was reading a contract looking for the fine print. For a terrifying second, I thought the makeup had failed. I thought he could see the red handprint burning through the layers of beige. My heart hammered against my bruised ribs. "Shall we?" I asked, desperate to break his gaze, desperate to sit down in the dim light of the dining room. Walter paused for one heartbeat longer than necessary. Then, he offered me his arm. "We shall," he said. But as we walked toward the dining room, I felt a shiver go down my spine. He knew. I didn't know how, and I didn't know how much, but Walter Kincaid knew that something was wrong, and for the first time in my life, the thought of my grandfather knowing the truth didn't bring me relief. It brought me a wave of cold, absolute terror. Because Melanie was right about one thing. If the truth came out, nothing was ever going to be the same again. As the town car glided smoothly over the asphalt, putting miles between me and the house, my mind did not stay in the present. It drifted back, pulled by the gravity of a decade of silence, to understand why I had frozen in that kitchen, why I had let her slap me without raising a hand in my own defense. You have to understand who Melanie was when she first walked into our lives. You have to understand the slow, methodical way she dismantled our world before she ever raised a fist. I was 16 years old when I first met her. It was 6 months after my mother had passed away from a sudden aneurysm, and our house felt like a ship that had lost its rudder. My father, Thomas, was a ghost. He went to work, he came home, and he sat in the dark living room staring at the television without turning it on. The house was piling up with unopened mail and laundry. Then came Melanie. She did not storm in like a villain. She slid in like a savior. She was a paralegal at a firm my father had done some contracting work for. She showed up one Saturday with a lasagna and a sympathetic smile that seemed to understand exactly how broken we were. She was polished. She was vibrant. She wore tailored blazers and smelled of vanilla and ambition. She tidied the kitchen while my father wept at the table, and she told me I was brave for holding it all together. For the first 6 months, she was perfect. She organized the bills. She got my father laughing again. She took me shopping for school clothes and asked about my grades. I wanted to love her. I was a grieving teenager desperate for a mother figure, and she played the part flawlessly. But the shift was subtle. It started with the furniture. About a year after they married, Melanie decided the house needed a fresh start. She said my mother's old floral armchair was depressing. She said the dining table was outdated, piece by piece. She replaced the things that held memories of my mother with cold, beige, modern furniture that looked like it belonged in a hotel lobby. When I cried about the armchair being thrown out, she sighed, looking at my father with a pained expression. She told him she was only trying to help us move forward, and that my attachment to old junk was unhealthy. My father, desperate to keep her happy, told me to let it go. Then came the money. It happened over dinner one night. My father was complaining about the stress of managing the payroll for his small construction business. Melanie reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. She said that he worked too hard to worry about the books. She said she had experience with accounts. She said, "Let me handle the money. Thomas, you just focus on building." It sounded like love. It sounded like a partnership. But looking back, I can see it was the moment she took the keys to the kingdom. Within months, the dynamic of the house changed. We went from being a family to being a dictatorship under the guise of propriety. Melanie became obsessed with keeping up appearances. If I wanted to go to the movies with my friends from the public school, she would wrinkle her nose. She would ask if those were really the kind of people a peer should be associating with. She started buying me clothes I hated. Stiff, preppy outfits that made me feel like a doll. And if I refused to wear them, she wouldn't yell. She would just look crushed. She would turn to my father and say she had spent hours picking them out, that she had spent her own money, and that I was being cruel. "You should be grateful." "Natalie," she would say. That word became her weapon. Grateful. If I questioned why my allowance was cut, I was ungrateful. If I asked why we couldn't visit my mother's grave on her birthday because Melanie had booked a spa weekend, I was ungrateful. She never hit me. She never locked me in a closet. It was all psychological. It was 1,000 tiny cuts. She isolated me from my friends by making me feel ashamed of them, until I stopped inviting them over. She made me feel like a burden that she was graciously tolerating for my father's sake. The only person she couldn't cut me off from was Grandpa Walter. Walter Kincaid was the one variable Melanie couldn't control. He was rich, he was stubborn, and he saw right through people. Every other Saturday, he would pick me up in his old truck, not the town car he used for business, and we would go fishing at the lake. We wouldn't talk much. We would just sit there, watching the bobbers float on the water. Those mornings were my oxygen. Walter was the only one who didn't look at me like a project to be fixed. He would hand me envelopes of cash for my textbooks or a new sketchbook, always sliding them into my pocket when Melanie wasn't looking. "Keep this for yourself, kiddo," he would say, his voice gruff. "And remember, a woman isn't free unless she owns something in her own name. Don't you ever let anyone hold the purse strings for you." Melanie hated him. She hated him with a venom she barely bothered to hide when he wasn't in the room. She hated that he controlled the family fortune. She hated that he drove a 20-year-old truck when he could afford a fleet of Ferraris. But mostly, she hated that he loved me. I remember the day the tension truly snapped. I was 18, getting ready for college. Walter had come over for dinner and mentioned, casually over roast beef, that he was setting up a separate trust fund for me. He said it would vest when I turned 25, intended for a down payment on a house or to start a business. The sound of Melanie's fork hitting her plate was like a gunshot. Her smile froze. She spent the rest of the meal talking about how irresponsible young people were with money and how family assets should be centralized for the good of everyone. Walter just ignored her, winking at me. That was the moment I became her enemy. I wasn't just the stepdaughter anymore. I was the rival claimant to the treasury. I went away to college, desperate to escape the suffocating atmosphere of that house. I studied experience design and threw myself into my work. I graduated with honors and landed a job as a researcher at Northline Systems, a tech firm in the city. I was good at my job. I was good at spotting patterns in user behavior, at seeing where systems were broken. But at home, I was still blind. Even after I moved out for a brief period, the gravitational pull of the family drama sucked me back in. Melanie convinced my father to expand his business, pushing him to take on projects that were too big for his crew. When cash flow got tight, she suggested they ask Walter for a bridge loan, just a temporary thing. She promised. I started seeing the cracks when I came home for weekends to help with the laundry or paperwork, trying to be the good daughter. I would find overdue notices for utilities stuffed in the back of the junk drawer. I saw credit card statements from banks I didn't recognize, opened in both their names. When I asked Melanie about them, she would laugh a high, brittle laugh. "Oh, Natalie, you have such a little imagination," she would say, dismissing me with a wave of her manicured hand. "That is just how business leverage works. You are being rude to question me after all I do to keep this family afloat." At dinner, she would make a show of my career, calling me our little corporate princess. She would tell guests that it was nice I could play at working, implying that my salary was pocket change and that I was still living off Grandpa's generosity. It was a lie. I was paying my own rent. I was even secretly transferring money to my father's personal account to cover the electric bill when I saw the red notices. But in private, the narrative was different. She would corner me in the hallway and hiss that my father was drowning, that Walter was threatening to cut them off, and that only her sacrifices were keeping a roof over our heads. She spun a web where she was the martyr and everyone else was the villain. Then came the health scare. 6 months ago, Grandpa Walter had a minor heart arrhythmia. It wasn't life-threatening, but it was a wake-up call. Suddenly, Melanie was the nurse of the year. She was at his house every day. She was bringing him soup. She was organizing his pill bottles. But I noticed other things. She started insisting that she needed to be the one to talk to his lawyers. She started asking for the passwords to his online banking, claiming it was too confusing for him to manage on an iPad. She tried to fire his longtime accountant, claiming he was overcharging. Walter, in his weakened state, let her help a little. He was lonely, I think. He wanted to believe his family cared. One night, about 3 weeks ago, I was staying at my parents' house because my apartment was being fumigated. I woke up at 2 in the morning to the sound of raised voices coming from the master bedroom. I crept into the hallway, standing in the shadows just like I had when I was 16. "We have to get into that trust, Thomas," Melanie was hissing. Her voice wasn't polished now, it was desperate. "The old man isn't going to last forever. If he dies before we get the signature, the money goes to the charity or to her. Do you understand? We will be left with nothing but the debt." "I can't just ask him to sign it over. Mel." My father's voice sounded weak, exhausted. "He is sharp. He will know." "Then make him sign it," she snapped. "Tell him the business is failing. Tell him Natalie is in trouble. I don't care what you tell him. Just get access to the capital before it is too late." I stood there in the dark, my heart pounding in my ears. It was the first time I had heard it said out loud. She didn't look at Walter as a father-in-law. She looked at him as a piggy bank that was about to break, and she looked at me as the obstacle standing in the way of the hammer. I went back to bed that night and stared at the ceiling until dawn. I knew, rationally, that they were stealing. I knew Melanie was manipulating everyone, but the habit of silence is a hard thing to break. I told myself I just needed more proof. I told myself I could handle it. I told myself that as long as it was just money, as long as it was just shouting, I could absorb the blow to protect my dad. I thought I could endure anything to keep the peace. I was wrong. Until this morning, I had convinced myself that Melanie was just a greedy, difficult woman. But as the car turned the final corner toward the clubhouse, I touched the throbbing bruise on my hip. The memory of her hands shoving me into the table replayed in my mind. The physical violence had shattered the illusion. The line had been crossed. I had spent 10 years trying to be the perfect, grateful daughter, trying to navigate the minefield of her moods. I thought I was managing the situation. I thought I was strong enough to take the emotional abuse. But as the clubhouse came into view, looming large and white against the blue sky, I realized I had been protecting the wrong people. I had been protecting the predators from their prey. And now, for the first time in my life, I was walking into brunch with no intention of protecting anyone but the truth. As the town car navigated the winding roads leading toward the country club, the silence inside the vehicle gave me too much room to think. My cheek throbbed with a dull, persistent heat, but the physical pain was becoming secondary to the cold knot of dread tightening in my stomach. I realized then that the violence in the kitchen had not been a sudden, isolated explosion. It was the inevitable combustion of a pressure cooker that had been sizzling for weeks. It was the desperate act of a woman who knew her timeline was running out. My mind drifted back to a Tuesday afternoon 3 weeks ago. That was when the first real domino had fallen. Grandpa Walter had called me out of the blue, asking me to meet him at a new development site on the west side of the city. When I arrived, the wind was whipping through the skeletal steel beams of what was going to be a mixed-use commercial complex. Walter was wearing a hard hat that looked comical over his blazer, but his expression was serious as he surveyed the construction. "I am finalizing the new will. Natalie," he had said, his voice raising slightly to be heard over the sound of a distant jackhammer. He didn't look at me. He kept his eyes on the horizon. "I am combining the family trust and the charitable foundation into a single entity. It is too much fragmentation right now. It breeds chaos." I had nodded, shivering slightly in the cold wind. "That sounds like a smart move. Grandpa, simplify the administration." He turned to me then, his gray eyes piercing. "It is not just about administration. It is about protection. I need someone to modernize the investment portfolio. I need someone who understands that wealth is a tool, not a toy. And I need to protect what I built from people who cannot see past next month's credit card bill." He didn't name them, but the implication hung in the air between us like a heavy fog. He was talking about Melanie and my father. He was telling me, without saying the words, that he did not trust them to steward his legacy. He was telling me that he wanted me to be the gatekeeper. I should have realized then that Melanie would sense the shift. She had an almost supernatural instinct for money moving away from her. In the days following that conversation, Melanie's behavior had changed. She became omnipresent at Walter's house. Every time I called him, she was there in the background, She was bringing him homemade casseroles that were rich with cream and butter. Despite his doctor's dietary restrictions, she was organizing his medicine cabinet. But most concerning of all, she was helping him with technology. I walked in on them one evening in his study. Walter was sitting in his leather armchair, looking tired, while Melanie sat at his desk, typing furiously on his laptop. "Just updating the online banking passwords for you." "Walter," she had chirped, her voice sickeningly sweet. "They make these security questions so complicated nowadays. You do not want to get locked out of your own accounts again." Grandpa had looked at me with a weary smile. "She is a wizard with these things. Natalie saves me the headache." I had felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. Melanie Carter, who claimed she couldn't figure out how to use the smart thermostat in our own home, was suddenly navigating complex banking encryption. It felt like watching a fox offer to install a security system for the henhouse. The tension finally crystallized into something tangible a week later. We were having a family dinner at our house. Melanie had insisted on a roast, setting the table with the good china. She poured wine for everyone, her movements jittery and manic. Halfway through the meal, she tapped her glass with a fork. "I want to make a toast," she announced, standing up. Her eyes were bright, too bright. "To family, to the responsibility the next generation holds to honor the sacrifices of those who came before. We are so lucky to have each other, and it is time we secured our future together." My father mumbled a "here, here" into his wine glass, looking everywhere but at me. After dessert, while my father was clearing the table, Melanie cornered me in the living room. She pulled a thick manila envelope from her purse. "I wanted to show you this," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It is a draft of a new family agreement. Your father and I talked it over with Walter, and he thinks it is a brilliant idea. It just simplifies things, puts everything under one umbrella so we do not have to bother him with every little expense." She handed me the stack of papers. "Just sign the last page. We want to get it filed by Monday so we can start managing the new property taxes." I took the papers. My job as a researcher involved reading thousands of lines of user agreements and data privacy contracts. I knew how to skim for the traps. I sat down on the sofa and flipped past the flowery language in the preamble. I ignored the sections about family unity and shared values. I went straight to the section on governance and disbursement. And there it was. Clause 14, subsection B. In the event of the grantor's incapacitation or voluntary delegation, all disbursement decisions regarding the consolidated trust shall require the majority approval of the Family Council, herein defined as Melanie Carter Pierce and Thomas Pierce. It was a coup d'etat buried in legal jargon. It gave them the power to outvote anyone else, including me, and potentially including Walter if he was deemed incapacitated on how the money was spent. "Melanie," I said, keeping my voice even, "does Grandpa know about this specific clause? The one that gives you and Dad total control over the disbursements?" Melanie's smile didn't waver, but her eyes went cold. "Of course he does. He wants to retire. Natalie, he does not want to be bothered with approving every check." "I see," I said. "Well, it is a legal document. I am not comfortable signing anything this complex without having a lawyer look at it first. I will send a copy to my attorney tomorrow." The change in the room was instantaneous. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Melanie snatched the papers out of my hand. "Why do you have to be so difficult?" she hissed. The mask of the loving stepmother vanished. "This is a family matter. Bringing in outsiders just complicates things. It makes you look greedy. Natalie, it makes you look like you do not trust your own father." "It is not about trust," I said, standing up. "It is about due diligence. If Grandpa agreed to this, he won't mind my lawyer reviewing it." "You will upset him," she warned, pointing a manicured finger at my face. "He is frail. If you go running to him with your paranoia, you will cause him stress he cannot handle. Do you want to be responsible for giving him another heart attack? Is that what you want?" "I am not signing it tonight, Melanie," I said firmly. She glared at me for a long moment, breathing hard. Then, she shoved the papers back into her bag. Fine, think about it, but do not think for a second that I will let you sabotage this family's security, because you want to play power games. She stormed out of the room to find my father. I waited until I heard the kitchen door swing shut. Then I moved. I knew she had left her bag on the side table in the hallway. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I reached into her bag, pulled out the envelope, and laid the documents on the hallway console. My hands were shaking, but I forced them to be steady. I pulled out my phone. Click, page 1. Click, page 2. I photographed every single page, focusing on the signatures and the clauses. I shoved the papers back into the envelope and returned it to her bag just seconds before I heard her footsteps returning. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of that clause burned in my mind, but it was what happened 2 days later that turned my suspicion into terror. I was going through my own finances, preparing for tax season. I pulled up a credit report, just a routine check I did every quarter. As I scrolled down the list of accounts, I stopped. There was a credit card listed there, a premium rewards card with a $50,000 limit. It was a card I had opened 3 years ago to help my dad buy materials for a big job, but we had paid it off and closed it, or so I thought. The status read, active. The balance read, $42,000. I felt the blood drain from my face. I logged into the card issuer's portal, resetting the password that had been changed. I pulled up the transaction history. It wasn't construction materials. It wasn't lumber or concrete. The charges were a stream of identical payments: $3,000, $5,000, $4,500. All of them were paid to a merchant labeled Brightline Holdings, LLC. I quickly searched the business registry database on my laptop. Brightline Holdings, LLC, incorporated 4 months ago. Registered agent. A generic legal service in Delaware, but the mailing address for correspondence? It was a post office box in the town next to ours. A post office box that I knew my father used for his private business mail. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating the dark room. It was a shell game. They had reopened the card in my name. Identity theft, plain and simple. And they were maxing it out, funneling the cash into a fake company they controlled. It wasn't just about stealing from Walter anymore. They were stealing from me. They were cannibalizing their own daughter's credit to feed their insatiable need for cash. I had closed the laptop, my hands trembling. I needed advice. The next day at work, I pulled aside Sarah, a senior analyst at Northline Systems, who had a background in forensic accounting. We sat in a glass-walled meeting room, and I showed her the screenshots of the family agreement and the credit card statement. Sarah's face went pale. "Natalie," she said, her voice low, "this is not just family drama. This is fraud. This is embezzlement. That LC? That is a classic laundering setup. They are siphoning money. You need to go to a lawyer immediately. You need to tell your grandfather." "I can't," I whispered, looking down at my hands. "If I tell him, it destroys everything. My dad goes to jail. The family is over. Grandpa might actually have a heart attack from the betrayal. I can't be the one to drop the bomb." "You are not the one dropping the bomb," Sarah said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "The bomb is already falling. You are just the one looking up and seeing it coming." "I will wait," I said. "I will watch them. Maybe I can fix it. Maybe I can get them to pay it back before he finds out." Sarah looked at me with pity. "You cannot fix people who are willing to steal from their own children. Natalie." I didn't listen. I promised myself I would wait and see. I promised myself I would gather more evidence, just in case, but I wouldn't pull the trigger unless I had to. I thought I was being noble. I thought I was being a protective daughter. I realize now, sitting in the back of Mr. Henderson's car, that my silence had been the permission they needed. By not exposing them the moment I found the credit card charges, I had emboldened them. I had made them think I was weak, or stupid, or compliant. When I refused to sign the papers, Melanie didn't see a person setting a boundary. She saw a loose end that needed to be cut. She saw a threat that needed to be intimidated into submission. The slap this morning wasn't an outburst of anger. It was a calculated maneuver to terrify me into silence, just like the years of emotional manipulation had been. She thought physical pain would work where guilt trips had failed. She thought a bruised face would keep me from opening my mouth to Walter. She was wrong. The car slowed as we approached the portico of the country club. I looked down at my phone. I had the photos of the fraudulent contract. I had the screenshots of the Brightline Holdings transactions. I had the time-stamped record of the credit card fraud. I had spent weeks terrified of breaking my family apart, but as the car came to a halt and Mr. Henderson walked around to open my door, I understood the truth. I wasn't the one breaking the family. They had broken it the moment they decided my future was less important than their greed. I took a deep breath, the air hissing through my teeth. I was done waiting. I was done observing. It was time to show Grandpa Walter exactly what kind of people he was dealing with. I stepped out of the car, the pain in my hip flaring up, a sharp reminder of why I could no longer afford the luxury of silence. The investigation was over. The trial was about to begin. To understand why the violence in the kitchen felt so inevitable, why the air in the house had turned into something combustible, you have to look at the night before. You have to witness the moment the Cold War turned hot. It was Friday night, roughly 12 hours before Melanie would strike me. I had come home late from the office, around 8:30 in the evening. My head was pounding from staring at spreadsheets all day, and all I wanted was a glass of water and the oblivion of sleep. But as soon as I unlocked the front door, I knew I was walking into an ambush. The house was silent, but every light in the dining room was blazing. Usually, at this hour, my father would be asleep in his recliner, and Melanie would be in her room applying her night creams. Instead, they were both sitting at the dining table. They were not eating, they were waiting. In the center of the mahogany table, sitting there like a loaded weapon, was a thick yellow envelope. "Natalie," Melanie said. She didn't offer a greeting. She just said my name with a terrifying, brittle brightness. "Come sit down. We have been waiting for you." I dropped my bag by the door and walked slowly toward them. The atmosphere was heavy, pressurized. My father was hunched over, his hands clasped tightly together on the placemat. He looked gray. He looked like a man who had been holding his breath for a very long time. "What is going on?" I asked, remaining standing. I didn't want to sit. Sitting felt like submitting. Melanie gestured to the chair opposite her. "We have good news. Wonderful news. Actually, your grandfather has finally listened to reason." I felt a cold prickle of alarm at the base of my neck. "What does that mean?" "It means," Melanie said, her smile stretching tight across her face, "that he understands the need for family unity. He understands that at his age, managing complex assets is just too much of a burden. He has agreed to the revised family agreement, the one I showed you before." She tapped a manicured fingernail against the yellow envelope. The sound was sharp, rhythmic. Tap, tap, tap. "He wants us to handle things now," she continued. "He wants to see that we are united before the brunch tomorrow. He wants to see that we are all on the same page. So, we just need your signature here, and we can present it to him in the morning as a done deal. A surprise gift of relief." I looked at the envelope, then at my father. He refused to meet my eyes. He was staring at the envelope as if he wished it would burst into flames. "He agreed to this?" I asked, my voice skeptical. "Explicitly? He said he wants you and Dad to have veto power over his trust?" "He said he wants peace," Melanie countered, her voice dropping an octave. "He is tired, Natalie. You see how frail he is getting. The heart arrhythmia scared him more than he lets on. He does not want to spend his final years arguing with lawyers or worrying about tax codes. He wants to trust his family. Any hesitation from us, any bickering, it just stresses him out. And you know what the doctor said? Stress is dangerous for him right now." There it was, the weaponization of his health. She was telling me that if I asked questions, I was killing him. "I am not signing anything tonight," I said. My voice was calm, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. Melanie's smile froze. It didn't disappear. It just turned into a rictus, a mask of plastic joy that didn't reach her dead eyes. Excuse me? I said I'm not signing it, I repeated. I told you weeks ago, Melanie, I will not put my name on any legal document regarding Grandpa's estate until my own lawyer has reviewed it. If Grandpa truly agreed to this, then he won't mind waiting until Monday for a proper legal review. There is no time for that, Melanie snapped, the mask slipping for a fraction of a second. We need to show him tomorrow. If we show up empty-handed, he will think we are divided. He will think you are being obstinate. Do you want to be the reason he has a stroke? Do you want to be the difficult one? I want to be the careful one, I said. My father made a sound then, a sort of strangled whimper. He looked up, and his eyes were rimmed with red. Natalie, please, he said. His voice was thin, reedy. Just sign the papers. It is complicated. The situation is... It is complicated. What is complicated, Dad? I asked, turning my focus to him. Why the rush? Why does this have to happen tonight? He swallowed hard. The business, he whispered. We are in a tight spot, a cash flow issue. The suppliers are holding back materials. If we don't show some liquidity, if we don't have access to a line of credit by Monday morning, we lose the contract for the mall expansion. We lose everything. Nat, the house, the cars, everything. I stared at him, feeling a mixture of pity and revulsion. So this isn't about Grandpa's peace of mind, I said. This is about you needing money, again. It is a bridge loan, Thomas pleaded, leaning forward. Just until the contract pays out, we just need to access the trust's liquid assets to cover the bond. We will pay it back, I swear. He swore, Melanie interjected, regaining her composure. She stood up and walked around the table to stand behind Thomas, placing her hands on his shoulders. It looked like a gesture of comfort, but I knew it was a gesture of control. She was physically holding him in place. Your father works himself into the ground for this family, Natalie. And what do? You prance around with your little job, buying your expensive coffees, living in this house rent-free while we drown. I pay the electric bill, I said quietly. What? Melanie blinked. And the water bill, I continued, my voice gaining strength. And I bought the groceries last week, and 3 months ago, when the insurance lapsed on the truck, I paid the premium so Dad wouldn't get fined. Melanie's face twisted. She waved her hand dismissively. Pocket change. You throw pennies at us and think you are a savior. Meanwhile, your father is trying to save an empire, and you are standing in the way because of some petty jealousy that you are not the favorite anymore. This isn't about jealousy, Melanie, I said. It is about theft. The word hung in the air. The silence that followed was absolute. I know about Brightline Holdings, I said. Melanie went still. Her hands froze on my father's shoulders. Thomas went pale, the color draining from his face as if I had pulled a plug. I know you reopened the credit card in my name, I said, stepping closer to the table. I know you have been funneling charges through a shell company to siphon cash, and I know that this agreement, I pointed to the yellow envelope, is just a way for you to gain legal control over the main accounts so you can do the same thing on a massive scale. You are trying to make yourself the gatekeeper so no one can see that you are draining the accounts dry. Melanie stared at me. For a moment, she looked terrified, but then the fear was replaced by a cold, calculating rage. She walked around the table until she was standing inches from me. She was shorter than I was, but in that moment, she felt looming. You have been spying on us, she whispered. I have been paying attention, I corrected. You think you are so smart, she spat. You think you can just waltz in here and accuse us of things? Who do you think Walter will believe? Me? The woman who takes care of him? Who manages his life? Or you? The unstable granddaughter who has always been a little too obsessed with his money? He knows me, I said. Does he? Melanie countered. I have been talking to him. Natalie, I have been telling him how worried we are about you, how you have been acting erratic lately, paranoia, mood swings. I told him I think you are having a breakdown. If you go to him with these wild accusations, he won't see a whistleblower. He will see a sick girl who needs to be cut off for her own good. He will put you under a conservatorship before he hands you a dime. It was a monstrous threat. She was threatening to gaslight my grandfather into thinking I was insane. I am not going to him with stories, I said, my voice steady despite the shaking in my hands. I am going to him with questions. In fact, I think I will call Elliot Marsh tomorrow morning. I will ask Grandpa's lawyer if he drafted this agreement. If he says yes, I will sign it. If he says no, well. At the mention of Elliot Marsh, Melanie flinched. Her eyes darted to the envelope, then back to me. Panic flickered behind her gaze. She knew Elliot Marsh was a shark. She knew he would smell blood in the water instantly. "You wouldn't dare," she hissed. "Try me," I said. I turned on my heel and walked out of the dining room. I didn't run. I forced myself to walk at a normal pace, even though every instinct in my body was screaming at me to flee. I went straight to my bedroom and locked the door. My heart was beating so hard it felt like it was bruising my ribs from the inside. I knew I had crossed a line. I had backed a wild animal into a corner, and I was still in the cage with it. I pulled a small suitcase from the back of my closet. I didn't turn on the main light. I packed by the glow of the street lamp outside my window. I threw in the essentials: a few changes of clothes, my passport, my external hard drive, my backup drive. I packed as if I were evacuating a war zone, because I was. As I zipped the suitcase shut, the sound was loud in the quiet house. Zip. I froze. I heard footsteps in the hallway stop right outside my door. They listened. I held my breath. After a long moment, the footsteps moved away, back toward the master bedroom. I grabbed my laptop and sat on the edge of the bed. I needed insurance. I logged into the account for the video doorbell, the one Thomas had installed, but which I had access to because I had set up the Wi-Fi. I changed the settings. I set it to upload every motion event directly to a secure cloud server that only I could access. Then I opened the voice memo app on my phone. "My name is Natalie Pierce," I whispered into the microphone, the timestamp reading 11:45 at night. "It is Friday night. Melanie Carter and Thomas Pierce just tried to coerce me into signing a document giving them control of my grandfather's trust. I refused. I accused them of credit card fraud via Brightline Holdings. Melanie threatened to tell my grandfather I am mentally unstable. I am recording this because I am afraid of what they might do to stop me from talking to Walter tomorrow." I saved the file and uploaded it to the same cloud folder. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, fully dressed, listening to the house. The walls in these suburban builds were thin. I could hear the murmur of voices from my parents' room down the hall. "She is going to ruin it," I heard Melanie's voice, muffled but shrill. "She is going to go to the old man and ruin everything." "We can't let her," Thomas's voice replied, sounding desperate. "The house, Mel, we will lose the house." "She is leaving," Melanie said. "I heard the suitcase. She is planning to run to him in the morning. We have to stop her. Thomas, we have to make sure she understands what is at stake." "What do we do?" Thomas asked. There was a pause, a long, heavy silence that chilled me to the bone. "We make sure she doesn't leave this house until she signs," Melanie said. I stared at the ceiling fan, watching the blades cut through the shadows. I knew then that the morning wasn't going to be a brunch. It was going to be a breakout. I squeezed my eyes shut, clutching my phone like a lifeline, waiting for the sun to rise on the day that would end my family forever. The sun had barely cracked the horizon when I opened my eyes, but I knew immediately that I could not stay in that house for another hour. My body felt heavy, not with sleep, but with the suffocating weight of the realization I had come to the night before. I lay there for a moment, listening to the silence of the suburban morning. It was a deceptive silence. It felt like the pause after a grenade pin has been pulled, just before the explosion. I sat up and swung my legs over the edge of the bed. My decision was made. I was going to pack the rest of my things, drive to a short-term rental I had looked up on my phone in the dark hours of the early morning, and then I was going to the brunch. I was going to sit down with my grandfather, Walter, And I was going to tell him everything. No more protecting my father, no more keeping the peace. The peace was already dead. I had just been the last one to notice the corpse. I dressed quickly in the semi-darkness, pulling on jeans and a t-shirt, thinking I would change for brunch later. I moved quietly into the hallway. The door to the master bedroom was shut tight. I tiptoed past it, my breath held in my chest, and went down the stairs to the dining room. The yellow envelope was still there. It sat in the center of the table where they had left it the night before, a monument to their greed. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My hands were steady now, a cold, clinical steadiness that comes with adrenaline. I took 3 clear photos of the envelope, capturing the label that read, Kincaid Trust, Revised Family Agreement, in Melanie's handwriting. I wanted proof that it existed, proof that they had prepared it before speaking to me. I sent the photos immediately to the secure cloud folder I had set up the night before. Then, I went back to my room and grabbed the handle of my small suitcase. The wheels hummed softly against the carpet as I dragged it into the hallway. I was halfway to the front door when the silence shattered. "And where exactly do you think you are going?" I froze. Melanie was standing in the doorway of the kitchen, blocking the path to the front door. She was wearing a peach-colored silk robe that she hadn't tied properly, and her hair was a mess. Her eyes were rimmed with red, the skin beneath them puffy and dark. She looked like she hadn't slept at all. She looked like a woman on the edge of a precipice. "I am leaving, Melanie," I said, my voice low. "I am going to stay at a hotel for a few days." "You are running to him," she accused, stepping forward. Her voice wasn't a scream yet. It was a venomous hiss. "You are trying to sneak out like a thief in the night to go tattle to Walter. You little coward." "I am not sneaking," I said, tightening my grip on the suitcase handle. "I am walking out the front door, and I am not a thief. I am the only person in this house who isn't trying to steal something." "Don't you dare speak to me like that," she snapped. "You have no idea what you are doing. Walter is an old man. He is frail. He is 82 years old. Natalie, do you really think he can handle this kind of drama? You go to him with your wild stories about credit cards and shell companies, and you will kill him. Is that what you want? Do you want to be the one who stops his heart?" It was her favorite card to play, the guilt. She wielded my grandfather's mortality like a weapon. "He is stronger than you think," I said, "and he deserves to know the truth. He deserves to know that the people he trusts are robbing him blind." "We are protecting his legacy," Melanie shouted, her voice rising now, echoing off the high ceilings of the foyer. "We are trying to save this family from ruin, and you are too selfish to see it. You are just a parasite. Natalie, a spoiled, ungrateful parasite who thinks she is better than everyone else because she has a little corporate job." I heard movement upstairs. My father, Thomas, appeared at the top of the landing. He was still in his pajamas, looking disheveled and terrified. He looked down at us, his hands gripping the banister. "Melanie," he called out weakly, "what is happening?" "Your daughter is leaving to destroy us. Thomas," Melanie screamed, not taking her eyes off me. "She is going to the club to poison Walter against us. Do something. Tell her to stop." Thomas looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Natalie, honey," he started, his voice trembling. "Please, just wait. Let's talk about this. Don't go to him yet. It is too much." "I am done talking. Dad," I said, looking up at him, "I am done waiting. I am an adult. I have the right to leave this house, and I have the right to speak to my grandfather." I took a step toward the door. Melanie lunged. She didn't block me this time. She attacked the suitcase. She grabbed the handle with both hands and yanked it violently back. I wasn't expecting the physical force. The bag twisted out of my grip, crashing onto its side. The zipper, which I hadn't closed all the way in my haste, burst open. My clothes, shirts, underwear, socks spilled out across the hardwood floor of the hallway. "You are not going anywhere," Melanie shrieked. She kicked a pile of my clothes, sending a sweater sliding across the floor. "You stay here until you sign those papers. You do not leave this house until I say you can." I stared at my scattered belongings, a surge of adrenaline flooding my system. This wasn't an argument anymore. This was false imprisonment. This was madness. "You are insane," I whispered. I reached for my phone, which I had placed on the console table by the door along with my car keys. I needed to call a rideshare. I needed to get out of there before she did something worse. "Don't you touch that phone!" Melanie yelled. As my fingers grazed the cool metal of my phone, she was on me. She grabbed my shoulder and spun me around. I saw her hand raise, a blur of motion in the morning light, and then, crack. The slap hit me with the force of a physical blow to the soul. It wasn't a movie slap. It was hard, messy, and humiliating. Her palm connected with my cheekbone and ear, sending a ringing shockwave through my skull. My head snapped to the side, and I stumbled, my feet tangling in the spilled clothes. I gasped, my hand flying to my face. The skin felt like it had been touched by a hot iron. I looked at her, stunned. She was breathing heavily, her chest heaving, her eyes wide and wild. She didn't look sorry. She looked exhilarated. "You ungrateful little brat," she spat. I tried to step back, to put distance between us, but I was cornered against the wall. "You hit me," I said, my voice shaking. "You actually hit me." "I should have done it years ago," she said. I tried to move toward the door again, grabbing for my keys. Melanie didn't just block me. She shoved me. She planted both hands on my chest and pushed with all her strength. I went flying backward. I flailed, trying to catch my balance, but my momentum carried me straight into the kitchen. My hip collided with the sharp, solid edge of the butcher block island. The pain was blinding. It radiated from my hip bone down to my knee and up into my spine. I cried out, doubling over, clutching the edge of the table to keep from collapsing onto the floor. The breath was knocked out of me. I stood there for a second, gasping for air. The taste of copper in my mouth. My internal monologue, usually so full of doubts and rationalizations, suddenly went quiet. Then, a switch flipped. A cold, hard light turned on in the back of my brain. "This is battery." The thought was crystal clear. This wasn't family stress. This wasn't Melanie being difficult. This was a crime. I was 27 years old. I was a tax-paying citizen, and I had just been assaulted in my own home by a woman who was trying to extort me. The illusion of family obligation evaporated instantly, replaced by the primal need for survival and justice. "Dad!" I screamed, looking up at the landing. Thomas had come down a few steps, his face pale as a sheet. He had seen it. He had seen her hit me. He had seen her throw me into the table. He took a step forward, his hand raising as if to say stop. "Melanie, that is enough," he stammered. "You hurt her." Melanie spun around to face him, her face twisted into a snarl. "Shut up. Thomas, do not you dare take her side. If you come down here, if you help her, you are just as bad as she is. Do you want to lose the house? Do you want to lose everything? Because that is what she is doing. She is destroying us." Thomas froze. He looked at me, clutching my side, tears of pain stinging my eyes. Then he looked at Melanie, the woman who held the strings of his life, and he stopped. He gripped the banister and did not take another step. That was the moment my father died to me. He didn't die physically, but the father I thought I had, the man I had been protecting for 10 years, ceased to exist. I didn't wait for him to find his courage. He wasn't going to find it. While Melanie was screaming at him, her back was turned to me. I saw my opening. I ignored the screaming pain in my hip. I lunged for the console table, grabbing my phone and my car keys in one motion. I didn't bother with the suitcase. I didn't bother with the clothes scattered on the floor. I just needed out. I threw the deadbolt and wrenched the front door open. The morning air hit me like a splash of cold water. "Natalie!" Melanie screamed, turning around as she heard the latch click. I didn't look back. I sprinted across the porch, my boots thudding against the wood. I practically threw myself down the front steps. A black town car was idling at the curb. Mr. Henderson, my grandfather's driver. He had just stepped out of the car and was walking up the driveway, looking confused by the shouting. I almost collided with him. "Miss Pierce?" he asked, his eyes widening as he saw my face. I didn't stop. I scrambled past him to the car, fumbling with the door handle. Behind me, the front door slammed shut, but not before the camera above it, the one I had reconfigured, caught Melanie's voice one last time. It echoed from the foyer, loud and clear, carrying through the open air. "Let's see what you tell him. I will make sure you never see a dime. You are nothing without us." I threw myself into the back seat of the town car and slammed the door, locking it instantly. My hands were shaking so uncontrollably that I dropped my keys on the floor mat. I pressed myself back into the leather seat, gasping for breath, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to break them. Mr. Henderson got into the driver's seat. He looked at me in the rearview mirror, his expression one of profound concern. "Miss Pierce?" he said, his voice gentle. Are you all right?" I heard shouting. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. My cheek was throbbing, a hot pulse of pain that synced with my heartbeat. I brought my hand up and touched the skin. It was tender, already swelling. "I am fine," I managed to choke out. "Just, please drive. Just get us out of here." As the car pulled away from the curb, I fumbled for my phone. My fingers were trembling, but I forced them to work. I opened the messaging app and started a new text to myself. I needed a timestamp. I needed a record. 9:45 a. I typed, my thumbs slipping on the glass. Melanie Carter physically blocked me from leaving the house. She slapped me in the face and shoved me into the kitchen island. Thomas Pierce witnessed the assault and did not intervene. I have left the premises, heading to Walter Kincaid. I hit send. The blue bubble appeared on the screen, a digital anchor in the chaos. I looked out the window as my childhood home disappeared from view. I wasn't just leaving a house, I was leaving a crime scene. And as the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a cold, steely resolve, I knew one thing for certain. I was never going back. I touched the bruise on my hip, wincing, and then I sat up straighter. I checked my face in the mirror. The mark was there. Good, I thought, a dark, unfamiliar corner of my mind taking over. Let him see it. Let them all see it. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat softly from the front seat. "Miss Pierce, are you sure you don't want to stop somewhere? A doctor, perhaps?" I looked at his kind eyes in the mirror. I forced a smile, though it felt like cracking plaster. "No, Mr. Henderson," I said. "Just the club. I have an appointment I can't miss." "Very good, miss," he said, though he didn't look convinced. I turned my face to the window. Watching the blur of green trees and manicured lawns, I was shaking, terrified, and in pain. But for the first time in 10 years, I wasn't confused. The fog of gaslighting had cleared. I knew exactly who they were, and in 20 minutes, my grandfather would know too. The tires of the town car crunched softly against the pristine white gravel of the country club driveway. It was a sound I had associated with safety for my entire adult life. This place, with its manicured ivy creeping up the brick walls and the smell of old cedar and expensive cologne, had always been the one demilitarized zone in the war that was my family life. Here, Melanie could not scream. Here, my father could not hide in his television. Here, it was just me and Grandpa Walter, and the rest of the world was held at bay by a heavy wrought iron gate. But as Mr. Henderson opened the door and I swung my legs out, the sanctuary felt different. It felt fragile. I winced as my weight shifted onto my left hip. The pain was sharp and deep, a throbbing reminder of the butcher block island Melanie had shoved me into less than an hour ago. I stood up slowly, gritting my teeth, and smoothed down the fabric of my long-sleeved blouse. I had applied another layer of powder in the car, trying to cake over the red welts on my cheek, but I felt like a clown wearing a mask of dried mud. Walter was waiting for me in the lobby, just as he always did. He was sitting in a high-backed leather wing chair near the fireplace, his cane resting against his knee, He looked impeccable in his navy blazer and charcoal trousers, a silk handkerchief tucked neatly into his pocket. He was 82 years old, but his posture was still as rigid as the steel beams that had built his fortune. When he saw me, he began to smile, that warm, crinkling expression that usually made me feel like I was 6 years old again. He started to rise, gripping his cane. "There is my girl," he said, his voice booming slightly in the quiet lobby. But the smile faltered. It didn't disappear, but it froze, hanging suspended on his face like a broken video frame. He had seen my walk. He had seen the way I favored my right side, the stiff, unnatural way I was holding my torso to protect my bruised ribs. And as I got closer, I saw his eyes narrow. He was looking at my face. He was looking at the heavy foundation that sat too thickly on my skin, unnatural for a casual Saturday morning brunch. "Natalie," he said, and the warmth in his voice had cooled by several degrees. He didn't hug me. He seemed afraid to touch me. "You are running late. Is everything all right with the traffic?" "Just a slow morning, Grandpa," I lied, forcing a brightness into my voice that sounded shrill to my own ears. "You know how the bridge gets on Saturdays." He watched me for a second longer than was comfortable, his gray eyes scanning me with the precision of a laser. "Right," he said finally. "The bridge." We walked to our usual table in the solarium, a bright, airy room filled with ferns and the soft murmur of polite conversation. Usually, I loved this walk. Today, it felt like a march to the gallows. I was terrified that if I moved wrong, if I flinched, the whole charade would collapse. We sat down. I chose the chair with its back to the window, hoping the backlighting would obscure my face. Walter took his time arranging his napkin on his lap. He ordered an Earl Grey tea. I ordered a black coffee, needing the caffeine to keep my hands from shaking. For the first 10 minutes, we played the game. We talked about the weather. We talked about the new exhibit at the art museum. But Walter wasn't really listening. He was watching. Every time I reached for my water glass, his eyes flicked to my wrist. Every time I adjusted my collar, he watched the movement of my neck. I found myself constantly pulling at the cuffs of my silk blouse, tugging them down over my wrists as if they were armor. It was a nervous tic I couldn't stop. I felt exposed. I felt like the bruises were glowing neon purple beneath the fabric. "So," Walter said, setting his teacup down with a deliberate clink, "how is life at the house? Melanie? Your father? Everyone is getting along?" The question was a trap. I knew it. He wasn't asking for a status report. He was fishing for a confirmation of something he already suspected. His voice was gentle, almost breezy, but his eyes were sharp, hard flints of intelligence that didn't miss a thing. "Everything is fine," I said, looking down at my plate. "Busy. You know how Dad gets with the business this time of year." "And Melanie?" Walter pressed. "Is she treating you well?" I gripped my fork. She is fine. We have our differences, but we manage." "Differences." Walter repeated the word, tasting it. "You know, Natalie, I have been thinking a lot lately about the atmosphere in that house. I worry it is not healthy for you, or for Thomas." I opened my mouth to defend them, to recite the script I had been memorizing for 10 years about how we were just a passionate family. But fate intervened. A young server, looking flustered and carrying a heavy tray of silver coffee pots, tried to squeeze past our table to get to the booth behind us. He misjudged the distance. The edge of his heavy metal tray clipped my left elbow hard. The jolt of pain was electric. It shot up my arm and straight into the bruised shoulder where Melanie had grabbed me. "Ah!" I gasped, the sound involuntary and loud. My body jerked away from the impact instinctively. In the sudden, violent motion, my right hand flew out to grab the table edge, and my left arm yanked back. The loose silk of my sleeve caught on the edge of the tablecloth and slid up. It didn't just slide a little. It bunched all the way up to my elbow. The silence that fell over the table was absolute. It was heavier than the tray, heavier than the building itself. There, exposed in the ruthless morning sunlight of the solarium, was the underside of my forearm. It was a canvas of violence, 3 distinct dark purple ovals, fingerprints, were branded into the pale skin, surrounded by a sickly yellow halo where the blood was pooling. It was the mark of a hand that had squeezed with the intent to hurt. I froze. The server started apologizing profusely, stammering about fresh coffee and clumsy feet, but neither I nor Walter looked at him. Walter was staring at my arm. His face had gone completely slack. All the color drained from his cheeks, leaving him looking gray and ancient. He didn't speak. He reached out across the pristine white tablecloth. His hand, usually shaking slightly with age, was rock steady. He wrapped his fingers around my wrist. He didn't squeeze. He held me with a terrifying gentleness, as if I were made of spun glass that had already shattered. He turned my arm slightly, inspecting the bruise, seeing the shape of the thumb, the fingers. "Who did this to you?" His voice was a whisper, but it carried a resonance that made the hair on my arms stand up. It wasn't the voice of a grandfather. It was the voice of a man who could level city blocks with a phone call. I tried to pull my arm away, panic seizing my throat. "It is nothing. Grandpa, I fell. I tripped over the suitcase this morning when I was packing. I am just clumsy." My voice wobbled. My eyes filled with hot, stinging tears that betrayed every word I was saying. Walter didn't let go. He looked up from my arm and locked eyes with me. "Natalie," he said, "do not lie to me. Do not you dare lie to me right now." "I am not—" "If you lie to me—" He cut me off, his voice hardening into steel. "You are not protecting yourself. You are protecting the person who did this. You are protecting a predator. And if you do that, you are putting yourself in a danger I cannot save you from. Look at me." I looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes, mirrored by a furious, burning anger. "Did a stranger do this?" he asked. I shook my head, the tears spilling over now, ruining the thick mask of makeup. "Did you do this to yourself?" "No," I whispered. "Who?" he demanded. One word, an order. I couldn't hold it back anymore. The dam broke. 10 years of silence, of excuses, of covering up, shattered under the weight of his gaze. "Melanie," I choked out. The name felt like vomiting poison. She didn't want me to leave. She didn't want me to come see you. She grabbed me. She threw me into the table." Walter closed his eyes for a brief second, a look of profound pain crossing his face. "And your father?" he asked, opening his eyes again. "Where was Thomas when this happened?" I looked down at the table, unable to meet his gaze. "He was there, on the stairs." "Did he stop her?" "No," I whispered. He stood there. He watched." Walter let out a breath that sounded like a shudder. He released my wrist, but he didn't lean back. He stood up. He grabbed his cane and signaled to the maitre d', who was hovering nearby. "Miss Sterling?" Walter called out. The manager rushed over. "Yes, Mr. Kincaid? Is everything all right?" "I need the red room," Walter said. "Immediately, and I need privacy. Absolute privacy." "Of course, sir. Right this way." Walter didn't ask if I wanted to come. He gestured for me to follow him. We walked through the dining room, past the curious glances of other diners. I kept my head down, clutching my arm, feeling the wreckage of my life trailing behind me like a wedding train. The red room was a small, soundproof private dining area in the back of the club. As soon as the heavy oak door clicked shut, sealing us in, the atmosphere changed. Walter wasn't just angry, he was in crisis mode. "Sit down," he ordered, pointing to a velvet chair. I sat. "Take off the jacket," he said, "and roll up the sleeve. I need to see all of it." "Grandpa, please," I sobbed, shame washing over me. "I don't want you to see." "I need to see it. Natalie," he snapped, his voice cracking. "I need to document it, because if I don't, they will say you made it up. They will say you are crazy. I know how she works." I took off the blazer. I unbuttoned the cuff of my blouse and rolled it up. Then I lifted the hem of the shirt to show him my hip. Walter gasped. The bruise on my hip was already turning a deep, angry black blue. the shape of the table corner clearly defined against my skin. He took out his smartphone. His hands were trembling now, not with age, but with rage. He took photos, close-ups, wide shots. He made me turn so the light hit the bruises clearly. It felt clinical, invasive, and absolutely necessary. "I am sending these to Dr. Eris," he said, tapping on the screen. "He is my concierge doctor. He will meet us here in 20 minutes. He is going to examine you and write a formal medical report. We are not going to the emergency room where things can get lost. We are creating a paper trail that is ironclad." He put the phone down on the table and sank into the chair opposite me. He looked suddenly older, deflated. He ran a hand over his face. "I brought you here today to give you a job," he said quietly. "I was going to ask you to take over the family trust. I wanted you to be the trustee. I wanted you to manage the portfolio." I sniffled, wiping my eyes. "I know. That is why she did it. She knew." Walter looked at me. His eyes filled with a sorrow so deep it looked like a physical wound. "I knew they were greedy. Natalie. I knew Melanie was a shark. I suspected for years that Thomas was dipping into funds he shouldn't have. I saw the discrepancies. I saw the strange accounting." "You knew?" I asked, shocked. "I suspected," he corrected, "but I told myself it was just money. I told myself that if I looked the other way, if I let them have their little schemes, it would keep the peace. I thought I was buying your happiness. I thought if they were financially comfortable, they would be good to you." He slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "I was a fool. I was an old, blind fool." "I didn't tell you either," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I knew about the credit cards. I knew about the shell company. I kept quiet because I didn't want to hurt you." "We were both wrong," Walter said grimly. "We thought silence was a shield. It wasn't. It was food. We were feeding a monster. Natalie, we fed it our silence, and it grew big enough to put its hands on you." He reached across the table and took my hand again. This time, his grip was desperate. "But we are done feeding it. Do you hear me? We are done." He pulled his phone back out. He didn't hesitate. He dialed a number from his favorites list. I knew who it was even before he spoke. It was Elliot Marsh, his attorney of 40 years, the man who was known in the city as the Rottweiler. "Elliot," Walter said into the phone. His voice was cold, flat, and terrifyingly calm. "It is Walter. I need you at the club. Now, bring a notary, and bring the criminal referral forms." He paused, listening to the voice on the other end. "No," Walter said, his eyes locking onto my bruised arm. "It is not a financial update. It is worse, much worse than we thought. They crossed the line, Elliot. They put their hands on Natalie." He listened for another second, then delivered the final blow. "Start the file, Elliot. Open everything. The trust, the accounts, the deeds, and call the district attorney's office. I want to know who I need to talk to about pressing charges for assault and elder financial abuse. Yes, today, right now." He hung up the phone and set it on the table. The screen went black, but the reflection showed two people, an old man who had finally found his fight, and a young woman who had finally stopped running. "The war has started," he said to me, "and this time, we are not the ones who are going to bleed." The arrival of Elliot Marsh changed the molecular structure of the air in the Red Room. If the country club was a sanctuary, Elliot was the gatekeeper who ensured nothing uninvited passed through. He arrived 45 minutes after Grandpa Walter made the call, walking into the private dining room with a grim efficiency that made him look less like a family attorney and more like a tactical commander. He was followed closely by Dr. Eris, a short, balding man carrying a nondescript leather medical bag. There were no pleasantries. There were no hugs. Elliot set his briefcase on the heavy oak table, the metallic click of the latches sounding like the cocking of a gun. "Natalie," Elliot said, nodding to me. He didn't look at my face with pity. He looked at it with the forensic intensity of a man assessing damage to a valuable asset. "Dr. Eris is going to examine you now. I need a full report on every mark. every bruise, and every point of tenderness. We are not leaving anything to memory. For the next 20 minutes, the room felt less like a dining area and more like a sterile examination theater. Dr. Aris was gentle but thorough. He asked me to stand, to lift my shirt, to turn into the light. The humiliation burned hotter than the bruises. I was 27 years old, a professional woman with a career and a 401k, standing in my bra in a private room of an elite social club, while a strange man measured the size of my stepmother's handprint on my arm with a plastic ruler. Contusion on the left deltoid, approximately 4 inches by 2 inches. Dr. Aris dictated into a small recorder, his voice devoid of emotion. Distinct digit impressions suggesting a forceful grip, bruising on the left hip crest, consistent with blunt force impact against a hard edge, swelling and discoloration on the left zygomatic arch. Walter sat in the corner, his hands resting on the head of his cane, his knuckles white. He didn't look away. He forced himself to witness every second of it, as if he were serving a penance for not seeing it sooner. When the exam was over and I had buttoned my blouse back up, shaking with a mixture of cold and adrenaline, Elliot took the seat opposite me. He opened a legal pad and clicked a silver pen. "Now," Elliot said, his voice low and steady, "I need you to walk me through this morning. But before you do, I need to understand the context. This level of physical aggression rarely manifests out of a vacuum. Tell me about the control. Natalie, tell me about the money." I hesitated, looking at Walter. "I feel stupid," I whispered. "I let it get this far. I knew they were manipulating things. I knew about the credit cards. I should have spoken up weeks ago." "Natalie," Walter said, his voice cutting through the silence. "The only person in this equation who should feel shame is the person who put her hands on you. Do not take ownership of her crimes." Elliot nodded. "Your grandfather is right. Victims often confuse silence with complicity. You were surviving. Now, tell me everything." I told him. I started with the small things, the comments about my spending, the guilt trips about being ungrateful. I moved to the bigger things, the pressure to sign the trust documents, the late-night arguments I overheard, the sudden obsession with family unity whenever a bill was due, and finally, I described the morning, the blockade in the hallway, the slap, the shove, the look in Melanie's eyes when she told me I would never see a dime. Elliot wrote furiously, his pen scratching across the yellow paper. When I finished, he looked up, his eyes sharp behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "This is excellent testimony," he said, "but in a court of law, or even in a settlement negotiation, testimony can be disputed. It becomes he said, she said. Melanie will claim you attacked her. She will claim self-defense. She will claim you are mentally unstable. We need corroboration. Do you have anything, emails, texts, voicemails, that show a pattern of coercion?" I blinked. The adrenaline had made me forget the digital trail I had been leaving for myself. "I have the camera," I said. Elliot paused. "What camera?" "The doorbell camera," I explained, sitting up straighter. "My father installed it, but I set up the network. Last night, when I realized things were escalating, I changed the storage settings. I set it to upload directly to a cloud server that only I have the password for. It recorded everything that happened on the porch this morning. It recorded her screaming at me as I ran to the car. You can hear her threatening to cut me off." A slow, predatory smile spread across Elliot's face. "Audio of threats regarding inheritance? That establishes motive." "I have more," I said, reaching for my phone. I took photos of the document they wanted me to sign last night. The revised family agreement. It is time-stamped, and I have screenshots of the credit card statements showing the transfers to Brightline Holdings, LLC, and I sent a text to myself immediately after the assault detailing the timeline. Elliot looked at Walter, then back at me. "You didn't just survive, Natalie. You built a case." He slid a piece of paper across the table toward me. "I want you to transfer all of that, every file, every photo, every login, to this secure email address right now. Digital evidence is the difference between a messy family dispute and a criminal conviction." As I began forwarding the files, Elliot turned his attention to Walter. "We have enough for a temporary restraining order," Elliot said. "We can have a judge sign it by this afternoon. It will bar Melanie and Thomas from coming within 500 feet of Natalie. But we need to go further. We need to stop the bleeding." "Do it," Walter said. "Cut them off." Elliot pulled a stack of prepared documents from his briefcase. "I took the liberty of drafting these on the way over, based on your phone call. These are revocations of power of attorney, effective immediately. Thomas and Melanie are removed from all access to your personal accounts, the medical directives, and the family trust. I am also freezing the secondary accounts associated with the construction business." "Wait," I said, looking up from my phone. "If you freeze the business accounts, the payroll will bounce, the innocent employees—" "There is no payroll, Natalie," Elliot said gently. I froze. "What?" Elliot sighed, taking off his glasses and cleaning them with a handkerchief. "I didn't want to alarm Walter until I was certain, but I have been running some tests on the accounts for the last few months. I set up what we call canary traps, small, specific deposits into the business accounts that were tagged to trigger alerts if they were moved to unauthorized locations." He put his glasses back on. "Thomas's construction business has been insolvent for 6 months. There are no new contracts. The mall expansion project they talked about? It doesn't exist. They have been using the business accounts as a pass-through entity. Every dime Walter gave them for overhead or materials was transferred within 24 hours to Brightline Holdings." I felt the room spin. "But Brightline is an investment firm, right? That is what Melanie said." "Brightline Holdings is a shell," Elliot corrected. "I had my forensic team run a preliminary check while I was in the car. It has no employees, no office. It lists its primary business activity as consulting. And do you know who the signatories are?" I shook my head, though I already knew the answer. "Melanie Carter," Elliot said, "and Thomas Pierce." "They were stealing from themselves?" I asked, confused. "They were stealing from the business to hide the money from creditors," Elliot explained. "And they were stealing from Walter to fund a lifestyle they could no longer afford. It is a classic Ponzi scheme, Natalie. But limited to one family, they were robbing Peter to pay Paul. And when Peter ran out of money, they came for your grandfather's trust." The realization hit me harder than the physical blow had. My father wasn't just a weak man being bullied by a strong wife. He was an active participant. He had looked me in the eye last night, begged me to sign the papers to have the business, knowing full well the business was already dead. He had tried to sell his own daughter into financial servitude to cover up his crimes. "We are going to the police station," Elliot said, standing up and gathering his papers. "We are going to file a report for battery and domestic assault. Then, I am going to the district attorney with the financial evidence. This is fraud, plain and simple, wire fraud, bank fraud, and elder abuse." I nodded, feeling a strange numbness settling over me. "Okay." "One more thing," Walter said. He hadn't moved from his chair. "You are not going back to that house, Natalie, ever." "I have a bag," I said. "I can go to a hotel." "No hotels," Walter said firmly. "You are moving into the penthouse at the Meridian. It is empty. It has 24-hour security, a doorman, and keycard access to the elevator. No one gets up there without your permission. I want you somewhere where they cannot reach you." The Meridian was Walter's flagship property downtown. The penthouse was a fortress in the sky. "Grandpa," I said, a pang of hesitation hitting me. "What about Dad? If we do all this, if we file police reports and freeze the money, he will be on the street. Melanie will destroy him." Walter looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It was a look of absolute, heartbreaking clarity. "Natalie," he said softly, "when Melanie hit you, did your father step in?" "No," I whispered. "When she threw you into the table, did he help you up?" "No." "When you ran out of the house, did he follow you to make sure you were safe?" I shook my head, the tears returning. "Then ask yourself," Walter said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Did he act like a father? Or did he act like an accomplice who was worried his getaway driver was quitting? The question hung in the air, brutal and undeniable. He made his choice, Walter said. He chose her. He chose the lie. And in doing so, he forfeited the right to be protected by you. Elliot slid a document across the table. It was a formal retention agreement, authorizing him to represent me in the criminal and civil actions against Melanie Carter and Thomas Pierce. "Sign it, Natalie," Elliot said. "Let us be the bad guys. You just be the witness." I picked up the pen. My hand was shaking, the vibrations traveling up my arm to the bruised shoulder. I looked at the black ink on the white paper. Signing this meant destroying my family. It meant sending my father to court, maybe to prison. It meant ensuring that I would never have a Christmas dinner, a birthday party, or a normal conversation with them ever again. But then I remembered the feeling of the table edge digging into my hip. I remembered Melanie's face, twisted with glee as she slapped me. I remembered my father standing on the stairs, gray and silent, watching me bleed. I pressed the pen to the paper. The tip scratched loudly in the quiet room. Natalie Pierce. I set the pen down. The shaking stopped. I looked at Walter, and for the first time that day, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like someone who had just survived a shipwreck and finally found the shore. "Let's go," I said. "I want to see that penthouse." The elevator ride to the penthouse of the Meridian took exactly 45 seconds. I counted them. It was a smooth, silent ascent that made my ears pop, lifting me away from the street level where my life had fallen apart and depositing me into a world of marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, and deafening silence. Grandpa Walter's apartment was less of a home and more of a fortress. It smelled of lemon polish and conditioned air. I dropped my small bag on the beige sofa, the only thing I had managed to salvage from the wreckage of my morning, and sat down. I opened my laptop. The screen's blue light, the only familiar thing in the room. I felt a strange, paradoxical cocktail of emotions swirling in my chest. On one hand, there was relief, a physical unclenching of muscles I hadn't realized were tight. No one could scream at me here. No one could shove me into a table, but underneath the relief was a cold, vibrating panic. I had just declared war on my family, and I was waiting for the counterattack. It didn't take long. My phone, sitting on the coffee table, lit up. Then it lit up again, and again. It buzzed and vibrated, dancing across the glass surface like an angry insect. Melanie. I stared at the name on the screen, my heart rate spiking. Elliot had been very specific in his instructions. Do not answer, do not block, document. I let it go to voicemail. Then a text came through. "Natalie, please, we are worried sick. Come home. We can talk about this." 10 minutes later, the tone shifted. "You are making a huge mistake. You are humiliating your father." 20 minutes after that, the mask slipped completely. "You ungrateful little bitch. After everything we did for you, you think you can steal from us? You think Walter will protect you when he finds out what you are really like? Answer the phone." I felt sick reading them, a nausea that churned in my gut. But I forced my hands to move. I took screenshots. I saved the voicemails without listening to them. I uploaded everything to the secure folder Elliot had shared with me. Every vibration of the phone was a fresh assault, but every screenshot was a brick in the wall I was building between me and them. By the time the sun began to set, painting the city skyline in shades of bruised purple and orange, Melanie had changed tactics. Since she couldn't get to me, she decided to burn the ground around me. My Aunt Linda, my father's sister who lived in Ohio, called me at 7 o'clock. Linda was a sweet woman, perpetually out of the loop, who communicated mostly through forwarded Facebook recipes. "Natalie?" Her voice was trembling when I answered. "Honey, I just got off the phone with Melanie. She is hysterical. She says you attacked her? She says you had some kind of psychotic break this morning and ran off?" I closed my eyes, pressing the phone to my ear. I could hear the confusion and fear in Linda's voice. Melanie was good. She was spinning a narrative where I was the aggressor. The unstable daughter who had finally snapped. She was poisoning the well before I could even take a sip. "Aunt Linda," I said, keeping my voice steady and calm, just as Elliot had coached me. "I am safe. I am with Grandpa Walter. That is all I can say right now." "But she said you hit her," Linda pressed, sounding torn. "She said you were screaming about money. Natalie, tell me what is going on. Do you need help?" "I am safe," I repeated, the words tasting like ash. "Please, if she calls again, just tell her you spoke to me and I am safe. I cannot discuss the details. My lawyer has advised me against it." "Lawyer?" Linda gasped. "Oh, honey." I hung up gently. It hurt. It hurt to hear the doubt in her voice, to know that Melanie was out there painting me as a monster to people I loved. But I knew that if I tried to defend myself, if I got into a debate, Melanie would twist my words. Silence was my only shield. While I was fielding the fallout, Walter was dealing with the source. He was in the study down the hall, sitting in his heavy leather chair. The door was open, and I could hear his voice carrying through the apartment. He wasn't shouting. Walter Kincaid didn't need to shout to be terrifying. His voice was low, granite hard, and completely devoid of warmth. He was on the phone with my father. "Stop crying, Thomas," Walter said. It was a command, not a request. "I am not interested in your tears. I am interested in the truth." I crept closer to the door, leaning against the frame, hugging myself. "No," Walter continued, cutting off whatever plea my father was making. "This is not a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding is forgetting a birthday. A misunderstanding is not bruises on my granddaughter's body and holes in my bank accounts." There was a long pause. I could imagine my father on the other end, probably sitting at the kitchen table with his head in his hands, Melanie hovering over him, coaching him. "You want me to drop it?" Walter asked, his tone incredulous. "You want me to let it go for the sake of the family name? Thomas, you are the one who dragged the name through the mud. I am just the one cleaning it up." He listened for another moment, and then his face hardened. "If you are innocent, Thomas, then you have nothing to fear from an audit. If the money is where it is supposed to be, the forensic accountants will find it. But if it is not, well, then you should save your prayers for the judge. Do not call this number again unless it is through your attorney." He hung up the phone and looked at me. He looked tired, every one of his 82 years etched into the lines around his eyes. "He says it is all Melanie," Walter said quietly. "He says he didn't know how bad it was. He says he was trying to stop her." "He stood on the stairs," I whispered. "He watched." "I know," Walter said. "And the numbers don't lie. Natalie, passive men don't accidentally embezzle hundreds of thousands of dollars." The next morning, the war moved from the digital realm to the physical one. I was drinking coffee in the kitchen, watching the news on a muted TV, when the building's intercom buzzed. It was the concierge from the lobby. "Miss Pierce?" The concierge's voice was professional but strained. "There is a Mrs. Melanie Pierce here to see you. She says it is a medical emergency regarding your father." My stomach dropped. It was a lie. It had to be a lie. "Do not let her up," I said, my voice shaking. "Do not let her in the elevator." "We have already stopped her, miss," the concierge assured me. "Mr. Marsh left very specific instructions, but she is causing quite a scene. She is demanding to see you." "Call the police," I said. "If she doesn't leave in 1 minute, call the police and have her trespassed." I went to the window and looked down, 20 stories below. I could see a tiny figure on the sidewalk outside the glass doors of the Meridian. Even from this height, I recognized the frantic, jerky movements. Melanie was pacing, gesturing wildly at the doorman. She wasn't grieving. She was hunting. She was trying to breach the fortress because she knew she was losing control. I watched as a police cruiser pulled up to the curb a few minutes later. I watched the officers speak to her. I watched her point up at the building, screaming something I couldn't hear. And finally, I watched her get back into her SUV and peel away into traffic. She was desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. That afternoon, Elliot Marsh came to the penthouse. He didn't come alone. He brought a woman with him, someone I hadn't met. She was sharp-featured, wearing a severe gray suit, and carrying a laptop case that looked like it could survive a bomb blast. "This is Sarah Jenkins," Elliot said, introducing her. "She is the forensic accountant I told you about. We have had a busy morning." We sat around the dining table. Sarah opened her laptop and connected it to the large monitor on the wall. "Melanie made a move today," Elliot began, pacing the room. "After she failed to get to you here, she went to the First National Bank branch on 4th Street. She tried to access the main trust account." "She had paperwork," Sarah added, pulling up a scanned image on the screen. "She presented a document that claimed to be an emergency addendum to the power of attorney, granting her immediate withdrawal rights for medical necessity. She claimed Walter was incapacitated." I gasped. "She tried to declare him incompetent?" "She tried," Elliot said with a grim smile, "but she walked right into the trap. I had flagged every account connected to your grandfather's Social Security number yesterday. As soon as the teller typed in the account number, the screen flashed red. The fraud department was alerted instantly. They kept her in the lobby for 20 minutes telling her the system was down," Sarah said. "Meanwhile, they scanned the document and recorded her conversation. The signature on the addendum? It is a clumsy forgery of Walter's signature from an old Christmas card. The bank manager confiscated the document and told her he needed to verify with legal. She ran out of the branch before the police could arrive." "So we have her," I said, feeling a surge of vindication. "Attempted bank fraud? Forgery?" "We have her," Elliot agreed. "But that is not the biggest news." He nodded to Sarah. She typed a few keys, and a complex diagram appeared on the screen. It looked like a spider web, with lines connecting various bank accounts to a central hub. "We finished tracing the Brightline Holdings LLC connections," Sarah said. "We know you found the credit card payments. Natalie, that was the tip of the iceberg. We subpoenaed the incorporation documents and the server logs for the digital transactions." She pointed to a box in the center of the web. "Brightline isn't just a shell company Melanie set up," Sarah said. "It is a partnership, 50-50 ownership." "Between Melanie and who?" I asked, though a cold dread was already pooling in my stomach. "Between Melanie Carter and Thomas Pierce," Sarah said softly. I stared at the screen. "But Dad said he didn't know. He said she handled the books." "The incorporation papers require a digital signature and a verified email address for the registered agent," Sarah explained. "The email address used to set up the account and to authorize every single transfer from the construction business to the shell company wasn't Melanie's, it was Thomas. Pierce, builds at Northline. Net." The room went silent. "That is his personal work email," I whispered. "He checks it 10 times a day. No one else has the password." "And the IP addresses match," Sarah continued, relentless in her facts. "The transfers were authorized from a device with a MAC address that matches your father's iPad, the one he uses to watch football." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. All this time, I had held on to a sliver of hope. I had told myself that my father was weak, that he was a coward, that he was whipped by a domineering wife. I had told myself he was a victim who just didn't have the spine to stand up for me. But the screen in front of me told a different story. It told the story of a man who sat on his couch, watching sports, and actively clicked approve on transfers that stole money from his father and ruined his daughter's credit. He wasn't a victim. He was a co-conspirator. "He knew," I said, my voice sounding hollow. "He knew about the credit card in my name. He knew about the theft from the business. He knew everything." "He didn't just know," Elliot said gently. "He helped build the structure. This wasn't Melanie going rogue. This was a family business, and the business was theft." I looked at Walter. He was sitting at the head of the table, staring at the screen. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked shattered. His son, the boy he had raised, the man he had bailed out a dozen times, was a thief who had conspired to rob him. "Why?" I asked. "Why would he do that to us?" "Greed," Elliot said. Entitlement, the belief that the money was going to be his eventually anyway, so why not take it now? And fear of losing the lifestyle Melanie demanded. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. I felt tears pricking my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of finality. The last thread connecting me to Thomas Pierce had just snapped. What happens now? I asked, turning back to the room. Elliot closed the folder on the table. This changes the landscape. Natalie, this isn't just a civil suit for recovery of assets anymore. With the forgery at the bank today, and the clear evidence of wire fraud involving the LLC, we are looking at significant felonies. I spoke to the district attorney's office an hour ago. Elliot continued. They are very interested. They are opening a formal investigation into both Melanie and Thomas. They are looking at charges for bank fraud, identity theft, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Prison? I asked. Federal prison, Elliot clarified. For a long time. He looked at me and Walter. My job is to recover the assets and protect you, but I need you to understand what this means. If we proceed, we are putting your father and stepmother in a cage. There is no going back from this. It is not a negotiation anymore. It is a prosecution. Walter stood up slowly. He walked over to the screen and traced the line connecting his name to his son's shell company. They made their choice, Walter said, his voice raspy. They chose the money over us. Now they can keep the money. We will take the truth. He turned to Elliot. Give the DA everything, every email, every transaction. Burn it all down. I looked at the diagram one last time. Brightline Holdings. It sounded so optimistic. A bright line leading to the future. But in reality, it was just a snare. And my father had walked right into it, dragging me with him until I cut the rope. Do it, I said to Elliot. I am ready. The sun had set completely now. The city lights were twinkling below us, indifferent to the tragedy unfolding in the penthouse. I felt a strange sense of calm. The secrets were out. The lies were exposed. The monsters weren't under the bed anymore. They were on a spreadsheet, and we were about to lock them away. The 3 days leading up to the family meeting felt less like a waiting period and more like the stillness before a hurricane makes landfall. Elliot Marsh, operating with the cold precision of a general, had orchestrated the gathering. He called it a family summit on future planning, a benign, corporate-sounding title designed to lure Melanie and Thomas out of their bunker. They had agreed to come, likely believing this was their chance to spin the narrative, to gaslight the extended family into seeing me as the villain and themselves as the beleaguered martyrs. I, on the other hand, was terrified. The idea of being in the same room with them again made my skin crawl. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the flash of Melanie's hand coming toward my face. I heard the crack of the slap. I felt the sharp edge of the butcher block table digging into my hip. It wasn't just fear of physical violence. I knew Walter would have security. It was the fear of the psychological warfare. I was afraid of crumbling. I was afraid that when my father looked at me with those sad, puppy dog eyes, I would fold. I was afraid that when Melanie screamed that I was crazy, a part of me would believe her. You will not be alone. Natalie. Grandpa Walter told me the night before the meeting. We were sitting in the penthouse living room, the city lights shimmering below us like a sea of diamonds. I am not throwing you to the wolves. This is not a debate. It is an arraignment. But the aunts, I said, picking at a loose thread on the sofa cushion. The cousins, Melanie has been calling them nonstop. They think I had a breakdown. They think I attacked her. Let them think what they want for 12 more hours, Walter said, his voice hard. Opinions are cheap, evidence is expensive, and we have a lot of evidence. He leaned forward, his eyes softening. Besides, there will be other people there, people Melanie is not expecting, observers, witnesses. He didn't elaborate, but the glint in his eye told me that Elliot had prepared a trap with teeth. In those quiet hours at the penthouse, I tried to fortify myself. I had a session with a counselor provided by my company's health plan, a calm, soft-spoken woman named Dr. Evans. We talked about boundaries. We talked about the difference between guilt and responsibility. You feel guilty because you are disrupting the system, Dr. Evans said over the video call, but the system was built on your suffering. You are not breaking the family. Natalie, you are breaking the silence that allowed the abuse to thrive. There is a difference. I tried to internalize that. I tried to separate my value as a human being from my father's approval. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. For 27 years, I had measured my worth by how much I could help him, how much I could protect him, accepting that he was not a victim to be saved, but a perpetrator to be stopped, felt like amputating a limb. That night, unable to sleep, I opened my laptop and recorded a video diary. It was a habit I had started since moving into the penthouse, a way to get the thoughts out of my head so they wouldn't drown me. "It is Friday night," I whispered to the camera, my face illuminated by the screen's glow. "Tomorrow is the meeting. I am scared. Not of Melanie. I am done being scared of her. I am scared of what this will do to my dad. I know he stole. I know he watched her hit me. But he is still my dad. I feel like I am holding the grenade that is going to blow his life apart. But then I remember the bruises. I remember him standing on the stairs. And I realize he pulled the pin himself. I am just the one refusing to jump on it to save him anymore." While I wrestled with my conscience, Elliot Marsh was sharpening his knives. He spent those days finalizing the subpoenas, organizing the forensic accounting reports, and coordinating with the district attorney's office. He was building a wall of facts so high that no amount of Melanie's tears could scale it. Walter was busy too. He spent hours in his study with his estate planners. I didn't know the specifics then, but I later learned he was redrafting his will. He was creating a binary choice for the legacy of his life's work. If I stood my ground, if I went through with the prosecution and refused to be bullied back into silence, I would become the primary trustee, the guardian of the estate. But if I faltered, if I let them manipulate me into retracting the charges and making nice, the majority of the assets would bypass the family entirely and go to a charitable foundation for victims of domestic violence. He wasn't testing me. He was ensuring that his money would never again be used to fund an abuser. He wanted his wealth to be held by hands that were strong enough to say no. The morning of the meeting dawned gray and overcast, the sky hanging low and heavy over the city. I stood in front of the mirror in the guest bedroom, staring at my reflection. The heavy makeup I had worn to the brunch was gone. The bruises on my cheek had faded to a sickly yellow-green, visible but not screaming. The mark on my arm was still dark, hidden under my sleeve. I chose my outfit like armor. No soft floral prints, no comfortable sweaters. I wore a charcoal gray suit, a crisp white shirt, and heels that clicked with authority. I pulled my hair back into a tight, severe bun. I looked like a CEO. I looked like a woman who signed checks, not one who begged for them. "Ready?" Walter asked when I walked into the living room. He was dressed in his best suit, leaning on his cane, looking like an old lion preparing for one last hunt. "Ready?" I lied. We took the town car to the main estate, the sprawling mansion where Walter had lived for 40 years. It was neutral ground, technically, but today it felt like a courtroom. As we pulled into the long, winding driveway, my stomach knotted. The circular drive was already full of cars. I recognized my Aunt Linda's minivan. I saw my cousin Mark's sports car. And there, parked right near the front steps like they owned the place, was my father's beat-up truck and Melanie's gleaming white SUV. Seeing that SUV, the one she had bought 6 months ago, bragging about how well the business was doing, made a fresh wave of anger rise in my throat. I knew now that the car was paid for with money stolen from Walter. Money laundered through Brightline Holdings. It wasn't a car. It was evidence on wheels. "Chin up," Walter whispered as Mr. Henderson opened the door. "Do not look down. Look them in the eye." We walked up the steps and into the grand foyer. The air inside was thick with tension. About 15 family members were gathered, holding cups of coffee, murmuring in low voices. When the heavy front door closed behind us, the conversation died instantly. 30 pairs of eyes turned to look at me. I saw the confusion in my Aunt Linda's face. I saw the skepticism in my cousin Mark's eyes. I saw the pity in my Uncle Bob's expression. Melanie had done her work well. They were looking at a girl who had snapped, a girl who had attacked her stepmother and run away. Then I saw them. Melanie and Thomas were standing near the fireplace. Melanie was wearing a pale blue dress that made her look fragile, innocent. She was clinging to Thomas's arm, her head resting on his shoulder. Thomas looked terrible. His skin was gray, his eyes sunken. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. When Melanie saw me, she flinched theatrically. She squeezed Thomas's arm and buried her face in his shoulder, as if the mere sight of me was terrifying. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. Thomas detached himself from her and took a step toward me. He forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Natalie," he said, his voice soft, pleading. "Honey, I am so glad you came." He walked over, stopping a few feet away. He lowered his voice so the others couldn't hear. "Listen, Nat, please, can we drop this? Melanie she is not well. This stress is killing her. She didn't mean what she said that morning. She is just under so much pressure." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had taught me to ride a bike, the man who used to read me bedtime stories, and I felt nothing. The cord was cut. "She hit me, Dad," I said loud enough for the people nearby to hear. "She didn't say something. She hit me." Thomas winced, looking around nervously. "She was upset. You know how she gets. Look, just come talk to us, privately, before the meeting starts. We can work this out. We can fix the misunderstanding about the money. I can explain everything." "There is no misunderstanding," I said, my voice cool and steady. "And I am not speaking to you privately. My lawyer advised me that any conversation with you or Melanie must be done in the presence of legal counsel and recorded." Thomas recoiled as if I had slapped him. "Lawyer? Natalie, I am your father. You don't need a lawyer to talk to your dad." "I do when my dad is an accomplice to fraud and assault," I said. A gasp went through the room. My Aunt Linda put her hand over her mouth. Melanie's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing with venom. "She is doing it again," Melanie cried out, her voice shrill and trembling. "See? She is delusional. Thomas, don't let her talk to you like that." Walter stepped forward then. He didn't shout. He just tapped his cane once, sharply, on the marble floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Enough," Walter said. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. "We are not here to bicker in the hallway. We are here to look at the facts. Everyone, into the main living room. Now." He didn't wait to see if they followed. He turned and walked toward the double doors of the great room. I followed him, keeping my back straight, refusing to look at Melanie. The living room had been transformed. The furniture was arranged in a semicircle facing the large fireplace, where a 60-inch television screen had been set up on a stand. Standing next to it was Elliot Marsh. He looked imposing in his dark suit, a thick stack of files resting on a small table beside him. He didn't look like a host. He looked like a prosecutor. As the family filed in, shuffling nervously, taking their seats, the atmosphere shifted. This wasn't a family reunion. The air was cold, sterile. It felt like an operating theater. Melanie and Thomas sat in the center, holding hands. Melanie was still playing the victim, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. Thomas was staring at the floor, his leg bouncing nervously. I sat in a wingback chair next to Walter, slightly apart from the rest. I folded my hands in my lap. I could feel the adrenaline humming in my veins, but my mind was clear. Elliot waited until everyone was seated. He didn't smile. He didn't offer refreshments. He waited for total silence. "Thank you all for coming," Elliot began, his voice dry and professional. "Mr. Kincaid asked me to convene this meeting to address some serious irregularities that have come to light regarding the family estate and the safety of his granddaughter, Natalie." Melanie let out a dramatic sob. "Irregularities? Is that what we are calling her lies now?" "Mrs. Pierce," Elliot said, cutting her off without even looking at her. I would advise you to remain silent. Anything you say in this room can and will be used in the legal proceedings that have already been initiated. Melanie froze. The word proceedings hung in the air. We are here, Elliot continued, because there are two stories circulating in this family. One story is that Natalie Pierce is unstable, ungrateful, and violent. The other story is that she is the victim of systematic financial abuse and physical assault. He picked up a remote control. We are not here to debate which story is true, Elliot said. We are here to look at the evidence, because unlike stories, evidence does not change depending on who is telling it. He pressed a button. The large screen flickered to life. The first image was a photograph. It was a high-resolution, brutally clear photo of my face taken in the red room at the club. The lighting was unforgiving. The red handprint on my cheek stood out in stark, undeniable contrast to my pale skin. A murmur rippled through the room. Aunt Linda gasped again. Elliot clicked the remote. The next photo was my arm, the 3 dark fingerprints. Click, the bruise on my hip, purple and black. These injuries were documented by Dr. Eris 45 minutes after Natalie left her father's home on Saturday morning, Elliot stated. The medical report concludes they are consistent with a forceful slap and a shove into a hard object. They are defensive wounds. Melanie stood up, her face flushing red. She did that to herself. She is crazy. She threw herself into the wall to frame me. Sit down, Melanie, Walter said. He didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the screen. I won't sit down, Melanie screamed, dropping the fragile act entirely. This is a witch hunt. You are letting her manipulate you. Walter, she is jealous because Thomas and I are the ones who take care of you. She is trying to cut us out. Elliot didn't argue. He just pressed play on the next file. The room filled with a sound that made my blood run cold. It was the audio from the doorbell camera. The quality was crisp. The chirping of birds was audible in the background, a serene counterpoint to the ugliness of the voices. Let's see what you tell him. I will make sure you never see a dime. You are nothing without us. It was Melanie's voice, unmistakable, screeching, hateful, and terrifying. The silence in the room was absolute. Everyone stared at the speakers. Melanie stood there, her mouth open, the color draining from her face until she looked like a ghost. Elliot paused the recording. That was recorded at 9:46 on Saturday morning, Elliot said calmly. Just seconds after Natalie fled the house, it captures the threat to withhold inheritance. It captures the motive. He turned to face the family, his gaze sweeping over the aunts and cousins who had doubted me. But the violence was just the symptom, Elliot said. The disease was the money. He clicked the remote again. The screen changed. Gone were the photos of Bruises. In their place was a complex spreadsheet, a web of lines and numbers. The title at the top read, Brightline Holdings, LLC, Forensic Flow of Funds. This, Elliot said, pointing to the screen, is where the real story lives, and this is why we are all here today. I looked at my father. He wasn't bouncing his leg anymore. He was frozen, staring at the screen with the look of a man who watches the executioner testing the rope. He knew what was coming. He knew that the complicated situation he had tried to hide was about to be laid bare in high definition. We are going to walk through this transaction by transaction, Elliot said, his voice turning hard. And by the time we are done, there will be no more versions of the truth. There will only be the math. I took a deep breath. The preamble was over. The trial had begun. The silence in the great room was not peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a courtroom just before the gavel falls. My family, aunts, uncles, cousins, sat in a semicircle, their eyes darting between me, Melanie, and the large screen that Elliot Marsh had set up near the fireplace. Grandpa Walter stood up. He did not look frail today. He gripped his cane not for support, but like a scepter of authority. He looked at the assembly, his gaze finally resting on my father. We are here, Walter began, his voice low and gravelly. To address grievous wrongs. We are here because the trust I placed in this family has been weaponized against the people I love. We are here to uncover the truth about the damage inflicted under my own roof. Melanie shot out of her chair before he could finish. She smoothed her pale blue dress, her face contorted into a mask of desperate indignation. "This is ridiculous," she cried out, turning to look at the confused faces of my relatives. "This is a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by a jealous girl. We love Natalie. We have always supported her. But she is emotionally unstable right now. She is easily manipulated. Walter, you are letting a lawyer twist your mind against your own son. This is about family love, not ledgers." "Sit down, Mrs. Pierce," Elliot Marsh said. He did not raise his voice. He did not look at her. He simply pressed a button on the remote control in his hand. "I am going to start with the timeline of last Saturday morning," Elliot announced to the room. At 9:45 in the morning, Natalie attempted to leave her father's residence to attend a brunch with Mr. Kincaid. She was physically blocked from doing so. The screen behind him flashed. It was the photo of my arm, the 3 dark bruises stark against my pale skin. "These are the marks of a hand," Elliot narrated clinically. Dr. Aris confirmed the spacing is consistent with a manual grip applied with significant force. Elliot clicked the remote again. The photo of my face appeared. The red handprint on my cheek was undeniable. "And this," Elliot continued, "is the result of a strike to the face, a strike delivered with enough force to cause immediate swelling." "She did that to herself," Melanie shrieked, her voice cracking. "She is hysterical. She wants attention." "If you believe that," Elliot said, turning to face her for the first time, "then perhaps you can explain this." He tapped the spacebar on his laptop. The audio file from the doorbell camera began to play. The sound was crisp, cutting through the room like a knife. "Let's see what you tell him. I will make sure you never see a dime. You are nothing without us." The voice was unmistakably Melanie's. It was not the voice of a concerned mother. It was the voice of a predator. The room went deathly still. My Aunt Linda covered her mouth with her hand. My cousin Mark looked at the floor. The echo of that threat, "Make sure you never see a dime," hung in the air, stripping away every lie Melanie had told for the last 48 hours. "That is taken out of context," Melanie stammered, looking around wildly for an ally. I was angry. She was running away. I just meant she would be cut off if she disrespected her father." "Context?" Elliot asked. "Let us look at the context." He flashed a series of slides on the screen. They were the text messages Melanie had sent me over the last 2 days. The threats, the gaslighting, the sudden shifts from begging to cursing. "You ungrateful little bitch, don't you dare answer the phone. We will ruin you if you talk." "This establishes a pattern of intimidation," Elliot said, "but violence was just the enforcement mechanism. Now, let us look at the motive." Elliot closed the folder on the abuse and opened a new file. The screen shifted to the financial diagram, the spiderweb of theft that Sarah, the forensic accountant, had uncovered. "For the last 2 years," Elliot explained, using a laser pointer to trace the lines, "funds have been systematically diverted from Walter Kincaid's personal accounts and intended business investments. They were moved into the operating accounts of Thomas Pierce's construction firm." I watched my father. He was sweating now, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief, refusing to look up. "From there," Elliot continued, "the money was transferred within 24 hours to a corporate entity known as Brightline Holdings, LLC. The name appeared on the screen in bold letters. "Melanie and Thomas told Natalie that this was an investment firm," Elliot said. "In reality, it is a shell company. It has no clients. It has no projects. Its only function was to receive stolen capital and distribute it to personal accounts held by Melanie Carter and Thomas Pierce." Melanie opened her mouth to speak, but Elliot held up a hand. "We also have this," he said. An image of a document appeared on the screen. It was the bank authorization form Melanie had tried to use yesterday. "This is a forgery," Elliot stated flatly. Melanie Carter attempted to use this document to gain emergency access to the main trust, claiming Walter was incapacitated. The signature is a copy-paste job. The bank's fraud department seized it immediately. "I was trying to protect the money," Melanie yelled, her eyes wild. "Walter is old. He forgets things. I was trying to make sure the bills got paid." "Is that so?" Elliot asked. "Then explain this email." This was the twist I hadn't seen coming. Elliot pulled up an email chain I had never seen before. It was dated 6 months ago. It was between Melanie and a man named Greg Vance, a shady financial advisor she had brought in. The text on the screen was magnified. "Melanie, the old man is having a bad week. His heart is acting up. He is confused and tired. This is the perfect time to bring the papers over. If we catch him when he's medicated, he will sign anything just to get us to leave. We need to lock this down before he gets better." A collective gasp went through the room. This wasn't just theft. This was predation. It stripped away the mask of the caring daughter-in-law and revealed a woman waiting for a carcass to feed on. "I didn't know," Thomas whispered. It was the first time he had spoken. He looked at Walter, his eyes wet. "Dad, I swear, I didn't know she was doing that. I thought we were just borrowing against future earnings. I didn't know about the emails." Elliot turned on him. The look on the lawyer's face was one of pure disgust. "You didn't know?" Elliot asked. "Let us see." He clicked the remote one last time. An email appeared. It was from Thomas. "Pierce, builds at Northline, net." It was sent to the same financial advisor, Greg Vance. "Thomas, go ahead and route the $50,000 through Brightline. I will approve the transfer on my end. Just make sure it does not show up on the main ledger. We need to keep this invisible to my father's lawyer. Walter asks too many questions." My father shrank into his chair. He looked like a balloon that had been popped. The defense of ignorance was gone. The proof of his conspiracy was glowing in high definition above the fireplace. Walter stood up again. The room fell silent instantly. He looked at his son, and the heartbreak in his eyes was terrible to witness, but his voice did not waver. "Thomas," Walter said, "you are fired, effective immediately. You are removed from all positions within the Kincaid business. Your access to the company properties is revoked." Thomas put his head in his hands. "Furthermore," Walter continued, "I have instructed Mr. Marsh to file a civil lawsuit against both of you to recover every single dollar you stole. We will garnish your wages. We will seize your assets. We will take back the cars, the jewelry, and the house if we have to." "You can't do that," Melanie screamed. "We are family." "And regarding the criminal aspect," Walter said, ignoring her, "I have given my full blessing to the district attorney. Whatever charges they bring, I will support. I will testify. I will not shield you from the consequences of your own greed." At that exact moment, the double doors at the back of the room opened. A man in a cheap suit walked in. He looked out of place among the family members, but he moved with purpose. He was a process server. He walked straight to the center of the room. He handed a thick stack of papers to Melanie and another stack to Thomas. "Melanie Carter," the man said. "Thomas Pierce, you are served. This is a notice of civil litigation for fraud and conversion. This is a temporary restraining order granting protection to Natalie Pierce. And this is a notification that you are subjects of an active criminal investigation." Melanie looked at the papers in her hands. Her hands began to shake violently. The reality of it finally crashed down on her. The game was over. The money was gone. The control was gone. She exploded. "You little bitch!" she screamed, hurling the papers at me. They fluttered harmlessly to the floor. She lunged toward me. Her fingers curled into claws. "You did this. You ruined everything. I will kill you." I flinched, bracing for impact, but I didn't need to. My cousin Mark and my Uncle Bob were out of their chairs in a split second. They stepped in front of me, forming a human wall. Mark caught Melanie by the arms, holding her back as she thrashed and spat. "That is enough, Melanie," Uncle Bob shouted. "Do not you dare touch her." For the first time in my life, the family wasn't looking the other way. They were looking right at her, and they were choosing me. "Get her out of here," Walter ordered. Get them both out of my house. Melanie was still screaming as Mark and Bob escorted her toward the door. Thomas stood up slowly. He looked at the papers in his hand, then at Walter. "Dad," Thomas said, his voice breaking. "Please." Walter turned his back on him. Thomas looked at me. He looked at the daughter he had failed to protect, the daughter he had tried to rob. He opened his mouth to say something, but he saw the look in my eyes. He saw the steel that had replaced the fear. He realized there was nothing left to say. He turned and followed Melanie out of the room. He chose her. Even in the end, facing ruin, he followed the toxicity because he was too weak to walk alone. When the front door slammed shut, the silence that followed was different. It wasn't heavy. It was clean. It was the silence after a storm has passed. Walter turned to the room. He looked at me, and he smiled. It was a sad smile, but it was proud. "One last thing," Walter announced to the stunned family. "I have updated my will this morning." He looked at the relatives. "I am placing the majority of the Kincaid estate into a new trust. The sole trustee and executor of that trust will be Natalie Pierce." A ripple of shock went through the room, but no one objected. After what they had just seen, no one dared. "However," Walter added, "there is a condition. If Natalie had chosen to remain silent today, if she had chosen to protect the family image instead of the truth, this money would have gone to charity. But she stood up. She fought. And because of that, she will manage the legacy. But a significant portion of the assets, 20%, will be permanently endowed to a new charitable foundation dedicated to providing legal aid for victims of domestic and financial abuse. We will use our money to make sure no one else has to fight alone." He walked over to me. I stood up, my legs feeling shaky now that the adrenaline was fading. "It is over, Natalie," he said softly. I looked at the door where my father had vanished. "He is gone," I whispered. "The man who hurt you is gone," Walter said, taking my hand. "But you are not alone. Family is not just blood. Natalie, family are the people who stand next to you when the world is falling apart." Elliot Marsh closed his laptop. "I will handle the police and the DA," he said. "From this moment forward, neither of you needs to speak to Melanie or Thomas ever again. Every word goes through me. The wall is up." I nodded. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. But it wasn't a tear of grief. It was a tear of release. The 10-year siege was over. Later that evening, I stood on the balcony of the main house. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn where I used to play as a child. I looked down at the driveway. The white SUV was gone. The beat-up truck was gone. The pavement was empty. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a notification from the legal app Elliot had set up for me. Status update. Temporary restraining order granted. Filed at 5 p.m. I stared at the screen. It was just a digital notification. But it meant everything. It meant I was safe. It meant I had won. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cool evening air. It tasted sweet. I put the phone back in my pocket and turned around to go back inside, where my grandfather was waiting for tea. I had lost a father. Yes, but I had found myself, and looking at the horizon, I knew that was a trade I would make 1,000 times over. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you found Natalie's journey to justice as powerful as I did writing it. Please leave a comment down below, letting me know where you are listening from. I would love to connect with you all and hear your thoughts on the ending. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so more people can hear this story and find the courage to stand up for themselves.